A young man named Mitsubo Toishi was excitedly tapping away at his computer keyboard, securing yet another victory. He loved fantasy games where he could immerse himself in worlds full of magic, ancient legends, and incredible adventures, creating unique characters and exploring boundless universes filled with mysteries and dangers. Toishi glanced at the wall clock and decided it was time for him to go to bed, as he had to get up early for work the next morning. Toishi was a 29-year-old bachelor, overweight, and an ordinary salaried employee. He disliked his current life, which brought a feeling of hopelessness that he couldn't shake off in reality, so he fully immersed himself in computer games, light novels, and the internet. He was an adult who loved fantasy and other worlds, though Toishi realized there were no other worlds except in his dreams, but no one could change reality. This boring reality was unbearable for him, as it seemed so flat and predictable compared to the vibrant, exciting fantasy worlds where every day brought new challenges, heroic deeds, and the chance to become something more than just an ordinary person. He wanted to be the chosen hero in a fantasy world. When he played games, he usually enabled hard mode, but if he were to actually go there, easy mode wouldn't hurt. But these were all just fantasies. However, the day ended and Toishi settled under his blanket. And then he fell asleep, or perhaps lost consciousness. Toishi dreamed of a fantasy world where he had a lovely fiancée holding his hand. That world was simply magnificent. In reality, he was a middle-aged man who was about to turn 30 this year, an ordinary OFFICE Chinese letter guy. He just sat at his computer playing games and browsing the web and then went to sleep. At least that's how it was supposed to be, but something happened. Toishi found himself in an unfamiliar place amidst dense vegetation against a backdrop of tall mountains. He tried to calm down and discovered that his glasses were gone. Moreover, he had lost a lot of weight and his huge belly had disappeared somewhere. He was also alone and no one could explain what was happening here. A voice from a computer screen that appeared in the air promised to explain everything to Toishi, stating that the young man was in a so-called other world. Its name was Iliard. This was the kind of world Toishi had always wanted, but it was very sudden. Furthermore, his beloved dog was waiting for him at home, and now no one could take care of her. Meanwhile, the computer informed him that magic existed in this world, and Toishi began to understand a few things. The voice continued, explaining that this world's development level was equivalent to the Middle Ages in his own world, but magic flourished here, making it better in that regard, though science was barely developed. Toishi asked the invisible speaker how to use magic, and the voice advised the young man to open the menu. Toishi followed the advice and saw his inventory, which included a short sword. He then checked his skills, surprised that everything looked like a game and his age was listed as 19, even though he was actually 29. He had many skill variations, including magic and swordsmanship, and could learn them all through the skill menu. Toishi wondered what this meant. The voice informed him that he could earn skill points at any time, and when his level increased, he could upgrade various skills in that menu using the points. Toishi would also be able to quickly master skills that normally take years to learn. This was amazing. He could now learn skills just by using the menu. A starter adventurer kit was also prepared for him in his inventory, and the voice advised him to use it effectively. He didn't have many skills yet, but he had just acquired them and still didn't know how they worked, so he decided to try them out somewhere. Toishi asked what he should do now, and the voice replied that he could do anything he wanted. He could become a hero or a villain, perhaps try to find his way home, or live here until he died, which wasn't a bad option either. The voice also mentioned that it would observe him from time to time, but if he wished, he could try to contact it. After that, the computer disconnected, marking the beginning of Toishi's life in another world. After some time, the young man reached a city in the kingdom of Calendale and realized he could understand the local residents' writing and speech. They didn't all look like ordinary people. Some wore collars, clearly indicating they were slaves. Toishi didn't understand how freedom worked in this world, nor did he grasp its hierarchy or currency. He had no idea about the current exchange rate of coins. He paid 5 large copper coins to enter the city. He still had 1 gold coin, 1 large copper, 2 silver, and 28 coppers left. He wondered if he would become a slave if he ran out of money. Toishi realized he had a long way to go to understand the laws of this world. Even if he asked someone about it, they would probably think he was crazy. The young man pondered his choices, fighting strong opponents and rescuing princesses, or perhaps something even better, becoming a harem king. He wondered if that was even possible here. It would be nice to run into a cute girl, like the one who had just turned to look at him. She was a very beautiful girl. Meanwhile, Toysha entered the Adventurers Guild building and greeted everyone. The bald man behind the counter told the young man he had never seen him there before. Toysha explained that he wanted to register because he had heard that full registration could only be completed at the guild. He stated his name and presented a temporary identification card, which was only valid for 3 days. The bald man introduced himself as Yuza. Toysha was pleased that his body wasn't as fat as it had been in his previous world and put on a businesslike smile. The young man stated that he could use a sword without armor, wield wind magic, and even heal a little. Ust replied that these were versatile skills, but he needed to explain a few things required for registration. First and foremost, he shouldn't cause trouble or use his weapons or magic to create a commotion in the city. Guild adventurers should help each other as much as possible, and killing another adventurer is strictly forbidden. Ust then informed him that he intended to conduct a test of his abilities. The bald guild employee then led the young man to a special training hall. The adventurers training there watched the newcomer with curiosity. Ust, the shield hero, addressed an adventurer named Ethan, who greeted both the bald man and the new recruit, Toishi. Ethan raised a wooden sword and remarked that it was a decent training weapon. In response, Toishi brandished his own weapon. The young man handed his short sword to the bald old man and asked him to look after it. Looking around, Toishi noticed that there were many beautiful heroines in this other world. He began to warm up, deciding he shouldn't be shy in front of the girls. He then asked Ust if he could use magic, and the old man replied that he couldn't if he killed his opponent. However, Toishi wanted to try out the magic he had learned as soon as the test began. Ust told Toishi and Ethan to get ready and start the fight. Ethan lunged forward, intending to attack his opponent sharply, but Toishi skillfully dodged the blow. In response, he struck with the hilt of his weapon. Hearing the loud shouts of the spectators, they continued their battle. Ethan, surprised, told his opponent that he thought he was just an amateur who liked to wear gear, but he was actually a pretty skilled swordsman. Toishi assessed his opponent's strength and realized he could predict all of his movements, giving him every chance to win. In another counterattack, he knocked the sword from Ethan's hands and then kicked his opponent hard in the stomach. Ethan wasn't the easiest opponent for Toishi, but he had his own techniques. He had acquired physical resilience, sword mastery, and unarmed combat skills, and he also had a second level in the art of wind magic. The young man used the air vortex magic. Ethan's body was lifted into the air and thrown back several meters, after which Ust was forced to declare Teishi Mitsuba the winner. The bald old man decided that this guy wasn't just good with a sword, but could also use magic, which meant he wasn't bad at all. Toishi was also pleased as he had just successfully used magic, and the spectators in the stands were cheering wildly. There, the young man noticed the same girl he had met on the city street not long ago. Ust addressed those present and asked who else wanted to fight this guy. 3 huge men volunteered to try. Ust congratulated the barely conscious Toishi on becoming a celebrity and passing the test flawlessly, telling him he now needed to recover. The bald man handed the young man an adventurer's card. Ust stated that everyone usually starts at F rank, but he had given him an E rank. Toishi couldn't understand the point of a rank increase. The old man explained that if he reached B rank, people would start to acknowledge him, and when he reached a rank, they would begin to admire him. After getting S rank, he would become a national hero. Toishi admitted that it seemed he had a long way to go, and Ust wished him to become the best. Toishi then headed to the burning Golden Beds Inn. There, he mentioned that Ust from the Adventurers Guild had recommended the place and asked to rent a room for himself. The person at the counter informed him that if he was recommended by the Adventurers Guild, the price for one night, including breakfast, would be 2 large coppers and 5 small ones. If he wanted to take a room for 10 days, it would cost 2 silver coins and 5 coppers. The innkeeper called Haipinya, the hotel maid, and told her to take the guest to his room. The girl kindly escorted Toishi to his room door and wished him to enjoy his stay. The young man liked the room and decided to check his status. Toishi noticed that he had gained experience points from the guild test. Additionally, he received 6 skill points. He could now acquire a new skill, but perhaps it would be better to level up multiple practical skills as efficiency was paramount. Then, the young man decided to check his inventory, which still contained the adventurer's kit. He could summon both the operation and stats menus with a thought, which was very convenient. The adventurer's kit included a blanket, a backpack, 3 torches, a flask, a short sword, an 18-meter rope, and rations. He wondered if all items would count as a single item if he put them all together in the same container, and if he could ignore the size and weight of stored items. He needed to test this out. In this world called Iliard, he was curious about what adventures awaited him in the future. A message appeared on the screen from the voice of God, asking him to call anytime, but Toishi decided that enough had happened for today. The young man recalled asking the girl to repeat what she had said. Toishi certainly didn't expect an unexpected confession from her. The girl asked him to date her. It was a bold confession from a complete stranger. Toishi went out to buy some gear for himself. A few hours earlier, he had visited a weapon shop in the city bazaar, which had a large selection of all sorts of weapons. The shop smelled of iron and leather, and the young man had to choose one item from the many on offer. Choosing his first armor was a very responsible task, and a young female employee of the shop offered to help him. Her name was Louis, and she was a clerk. Toishi, in turn, gave his name and explained to the girl that he wanted to buy leather armor. Judging by her pointed ears, Louis was an elf. Toishi remembered how Louis unexpectedly hugged him. Despite other customers watching them, the touch was pleasant and she smelled very good. Her body was tender and soft. The girl helped him choose armor and, with a happy voice, asked Toishi what style of gloves and knee pads he liked. He replied that he needed something for close combat for sword fighting, but his budget was 9 silver coins. Louis informed him that it would be good to reinforce his knee pads and elbows with metal, and his boots could also be reinforced, but this would cost a little more than his stated budget. Toishi liked this other world, and suddenly he saw a huge black cat. From Louis's address to it, Toishi understood that the cat was the manager of this shop. It seemed this new world was full of wonders. Meanwhile, the girl offered him a weapon. Toishi needed a sword, but he could also use wind magic instead. Louis asked about a conductor for him. Would Big Brother really use wind magic without a conductor? Didn't he know it was very inefficient? She opened a small box at the bottom of which lay a tube and informed him that it was the cheapest conductor in their shop. It looked like a wooden stick, and Louis energetically said that he would immediately see the difference when he tried this conductor. Toishi realized that he could use wind bullets with it. The effect was truly amazing. The young man realized that he could draw magical energy through this conductor. He asked the girl if he could use it as a weapon. She ducked behind the counter and said they had a cheap mace-like staff for only 6 silver coins, but Toishi asked for a discount. The girl subtly glanced at her cat boss, who gave a signal, and then Louis gave a discount on everything, including the entire set Toishi bought. After shopping at the weapons store, Toishi returned to the guild, and Us told him he now looked more like a real adventurer. The young man decided to see how his new weapon worked, having leveled up his polearm mastery to level 2 just for this. Toishi began his training. He felt something when he acquired these abilities. He felt that the body enhancement skill helped him when running, and improved sword mastery made his body more stable. Toishi concluded that he was now ready to fight in this new world. That girl appeared when he was resting after an exhausting training session. That's when she suggested Toishi team up with her, explaining that she had just become an adventurer. However, she was afraid to fight monsters alone and had considered joining a group, but it hadn't worked out for her. Toishi was slightly disappointed because it wasn't a confession of love. She meant teaming up as adventurers. The girl admitted she had watched him during his ability check and noted his excellent sword skills and strong magic. She even expressed doubt that he was as much of a beginner as she was. That's why she wanted to be with him. Toishi now understood why she was so nervous. Still, he was glad this girl trusted him, and she was very cute. It was just a shame it wasn't a love confession. But this was another world, a place where anything could happen to him if he wasn't careful, yet for some reason, he trusted this girl. It was too good to be true. Toishi felt she was holding something back and wanted to hear her real motive, as there were many people stronger than him, so why did she approach him? The girl replied that Toishi seemed to be a former knight or mercenary. He had no experience, but his strength was abnormal. She wanted to follow someone strong, and anyone who saw Toishi would think the same, but the young man had no doubt that this girl was hiding something. But Ust assured Toishi that this girl could be trusted, and he was even willing to vouch for her. Toishi told himself not to be so suspicious of an innocent girl. Even though she was a beginner, she had a lot of knowledge and useful skills. However, he had to be careful because he had never been to this land before. But he hadn't decided anything about the group yet, so he wasn't going to worry about it for now. He extended his hand and introduced himself. The girl smiled, shaking his hand, and stated that her name was Marl. Marl declared that she was happy to go on an adventure with Toishi. Noticing her energetic demeanor, he suggested they immediately accept a guild request. Marl was slightly surprised that he wanted to take on a mission right away, and the young man explained that they were adventurers, so they were obligated to always seek out adventures. It seemed to him that the girl wasn't in much of a hurry to get started. He reassured Marl, telling her that everything would be fine. If it got dangerous, they would just run away and he would protect her in case of any threat. These words were very pleasing to the girl. Her eyes lit up with joy. Toishi only said this to her because he wanted adventure, and no matter what happened, he would never tell her the truth. After that, they took a quest at the guild. Then they went outside, and Marl was surprised to see Toishi pull a weapon out of thin air, meaning he could use a treasure trove. Toishi called it a storage, and it wasn't a simple ability in this world. Marl had many things, and traveling would be difficult for her, so she envied Toishi, who didn't have to carry his belongings. The young man replied that it was such a rare ability that he shouldn't tell anyone about the nature of his powers. He then asked what weapon Marl used. Learning it was a sword, he suggested they have a small sparring match. He wanted to see what she was capable of. Marl screamed and rushed to attack her opponent. Toishi had a bad feeling about all of this, as her waist should have been straightened. The girl sprawled on the ground, exposing her beautiful thighs, as Toishi skillfully dodged her attack. He suggested that the girl just forget about forming a group, but Marl chased after him. She clung to his leg with all her might, and the young man realized why she wasn't accepted into other groups. This girl was an absolute zero and couldn't participate in any battles. Toishi sincerely advised Marl to give up on becoming an adventurer. She should return home and live a normal life. The girl bitterly replied that she had nowhere else to go back to. Suddenly, her eyes widened in horror, and pointing a finger towards the bushes, she told Toishi that someone was approaching. It was a wild boar, a massive tusked monster. Marl sank to the ground in fear, unable to believe the boar had appeared so quickly. Toishi asked the girl to help him while he approached the monster from the front. Marl was completely demoralized, her body trembled, and she shivered uncontrollably. Toishi, of course, considered that he could fight in another world, but he wasn't obligated to protect anyone. The young man's thoughts were interrupted by Marl's piercing scream, as she warned the adventurer about the boar's attack. The beast was faster than Toishi had anticipated, and he couldn't understand why the monster was chasing him, unable to shake it off. Toishi pulled out his club and prepared to battle the boar. The young man could use his skills without limitations, so he summoned wind-rending magic. The boar's body lifted into the air and then fell to the ground, immobilized. Marl addressed Mr. Toishi, expressing her joy that he was still alive. Toishi curtly told the girl that adventurers inevitably face dangers, and she would hardly be able to protect herself. He was doing his best, but he might not have enough strength to look after others. Marl replied that F and E rank adventurers usually couldn't stand against a boar. She knew this, yet she still embarked on the adventure. This was all because Toishi himself had said he would protect her, but the young man responded that any adventuress must protect herself, her own life belongs to her, and the girl admitted she had been a bit reckless. She couldn't become an adventurer, not even having the ability for it. She couldn't fight and had become a burden to Mr. Toishi, but he was the only one who protected her. He was the one she wanted to emulate. Toishi placed his palm on the girl's head and said he was glad she was all right. Marl asked the young man for permission to go down to the river and wash her clothes, because when the boar appeared, she had been very scared. She was so frightened that she wet herself and now wouldn't be able to get married. Marl looked intently at the stunned Toishi and asked if he would take her as his wife. Toishi and Marl went into the forest together, where they encountered two goblins, whose approach Marl also informed the young man about. Soon, the number of these monsters increased to 5, and another wild boar prepared to attack them from behind. Toishi noted that Marl was useless in a fight but very observant of her surroundings, which made it much easier for him to battle. The girl was the first to sense the boar's presence, and as Ust said, she might have a good intuition. It seemed Marl wasn't entirely useless after all. After some time, Toishi managed to deal with all the monsters, 3 small boars and 29 goblins. Toishi was quite scared during this fight. Real life and games are truly different things. An old man Ust, who met them at the guild, expressed his joy that they returned alive. Marl couldn't stop marveling at Mr. Toishi's abilities. First, he took out the monsters one by one, then put them all into his treasure box and brought them home, to which the young man explained that it's called an inventory. Us laid out the adventurer's reward on the counter, and Toishi asked how he calculated it all. The master replied that it depends on the size and condition of the bodies, but his small boars and goblins were worth about 5 large copper coins each. The old man asked how they planned to split the money, as payment usually depends on one's contribution to the hunt, and Marl admitted that she hadn't lifted a finger in the battle. However, Toishi said that Marl was his map, and she also noticed the monsters before he did and warned him of the attack. Even during the battle, she quickly informed him of the number and location of enemies, so the amount was well-deserved. Ust replied that despite all this, the size of their shares indicated that Toishi did more in the fight. The two of them would definitely become famous adventurers, with his magic and swordsmanship skills, an adventurer with a treasure box, and a beautiful girl with an excellent ability to detect opponents. Ust was confident that they complemented each other very well. Marl thanked Toishi for the day, and the young man was also grateful to her. The girl expressed her desire to take another quest at the guild together next time. Heading to the inn, Toishi thought that the other world wasn't so bad after all. When he entered his hotel room and went to sleep, he felt a severe headache and a dry mouth, as if in the throes of a hangover. He desperately wanted to drink some water. A girl was in his bed. Living freely in another world was much harder than he had previously imagined. As they said goodbye, Marl told Toishi that she wasn't as useful as she'd hoped, but they could take a guild quest together next time. After the young man left, she informed us that she wanted to go to an inn because it was more budget-friendly than this establishment, and the old man told her to be careful since it was already dark outside. To her surprise, she met Toishi at the tavern, who was having dinner, and invited her to his table. Marl told Toishi that she was glad to be staying at the same inn as him, but of course, it wasn't a coincidence. The girl had only one goal: to get as close to the mister as possible, no matter what. She poured wine into the young man's glass and thought that Operation Mr. Toishi had begun, while the young adventurer said that thanks to her, he now had money in his wallet and they should celebrate together. They raised their glasses and drank to each other's health. Marl decided to start with a small conversation and asked Toishi why he wanted to become an adventurer. The young man replied that he spent his free time training with a teacher in his hometown, but he wanted to see how far he could go. Now, he couldn't return home for various reasons. The girl wasn't foolish and realized he was avoiding the question, so she asked where he was from, and Toishi replied that he was from Earth. Marl had never heard of such a place and was sure it was very far away. But she was certain that Mr. Toishi had black hair, slightly pointed almond-shaped eyes, a handsome face with regular, harmonious features, a not too muscular, proportionate body, and was tall. He was like a hero from the fairy tales she often heard at home. Marl understood that Toishi couldn't return home now, and the young man asked what she was going to do next, if there was anyone she could rely on. She replied that the person she could rely on was sitting right in front of her. Marl confessed to the young man that she wanted to be his wife no matter how, and she wanted it today. At this point, they ran out of alcohol, and Marl ordered more for Toishi. Marl ordered 1 bottle of nectar. She told him that she had no home to return to, and Toishi should try this drink so she wouldn't have to go back at all, at least just for tonight. Soon, Toishi was slurring his words, completely drunk. He told Marl that he didn't believe a girl her age would stay at an inn with someone she had just met, and Marl realized that Toishi was someone who couldn't keep his mouth shut when he was drunk. Toishi mumbled that she was too attractive to lose, and that he actually stayed to drink because he was worried about her. Marl told Toishi that for some reason, when he protected her, she saw his gentle side and it was really cool. Even when they ran into each other in town, it felt like a fated encounter, blessed by God. She had already fallen in love with him back then, but Toishi wondered why she became an adventurer. The girl suddenly declared that she was, in fact, a princess. 2 years ago, she was supposed to be married off to a scumbag prince from a neighboring country who was rumored to be a terrible person. Toishi finished her sentence, saying that she didn't like it, and that's why she ran away from the castle to become an adventurer. The young man thought this story was too cliché, but since she was a princess, hanging out with her wouldn't be easy. Marl then asked if it wouldn't be better if Toishi, the adventurer, married a princess. Or did he not like her? Toishi, flustered, asked the girl if she didn't have a family, suggesting that instead of seeking adventures, she could have stayed in her hometown. Marl gracefully arched her back and asked Toishi if she wasn't beautiful. Toishi felt a little dizzy and replied that he hadn't said that. The young man got drunk and collapsed right under the table. Marl leaned down to him and said that she worried about him more than anyone else. and he had even said that she was too cute for him to get completely wasted. She told Toishi that he could just lie there for a bit and she would take care of everything else. Marl was pleased with herself as she had planned everything. Now he was holding her hand and lying with her on a soft bed. Toishi woke up with a terrible hangover. It was already completely bright outside. He was surprised to see Marl sleeping next to him and incredulously touched her chest, after which the girl blinked. Marl smiled mysteriously and wished Toishi a good morning. The young man couldn't believe this had happened to him. He even cried out, and Marl calmly asked him why he was so cruel, how he could shout after a night with such a beautiful girl, and Toishi asked her why she was in his room. Marl replied that if he didn't remember anything, she could tell him everything. She explained that a girl of marriageable age had lived in the same room with a man she knew, but Toishi-san had gotten completely drunk, seen her as a beauty, and then she had gone through a lot. Now she rightfully belonged to Toishi-san, and he could have as much fun with her as he pleased. Toishi definitely didn't want to hear something like that. He told himself to calm down, realizing that if he didn't take responsibility, Marl's innocent image would be ruined. Marl blushed and confessed that Toishi-san had been very active. When she said she was scared, he had gently hugged her and held her from behind. Toishi covered his face with his hands and asked her not to go into detail. He felt immense guilt, so much so that he couldn't even look at the girl, who then asked if he was angry. There was no point crying over spilled milk, she was perfectly fine. Toishi reproached himself for his wastefulness, as he couldn't even remember his first night with such a beautiful woman. At this point, Marl gently hugged the young man and asked if they could do it again. Just then, Hopinion knocked on the room door and announced that she had come to clean. Toishi got out of bed and asked her to leave and come back later. Afterward, he and Marl got out of bed and got dressed. Marl, completely naked, showed no signs of embarrassment whatsoever. Toishi had to admit that she looked quite erotic when she was getting dressed, and the girl laughed joyfully, assuming he was very aroused. Toishi asked her to calm down and promised that he would protect her, even if any problems arose. Then, as companions, the two of them went to have breakfast together. Marl and Toishi were strolling through the city streets, and the girl remarked that it felt like a date. Toishi thought about how walking with such a pretty girl like Marl would have been impossible in his past world. Reflecting on his life there, he was content with everything except his excess weight, and life here felt like a dream. They arrived at a weapon shop, where they were greeted by a girl Toishi already knew. Toishi asked to look around again, explaining that the club he bought there had helped him deal with monsters, but it was now unusable, so he had returned to choose another weapon. He asked Marl if she had ever been to this shop before, and she admitted she had visited a couple of times. Toishi then turned to the shopkeeper and stated that he wanted to choose a weapon that could be used for defense in his next battle. Cat Louison himself came out to serve Marl. He inspected Toishi's club and suggested that his weapon had been through some tough times. His weapon could be used in combat, but it was generally considered more suitable for mages in the rear, as mages typically don't fight on the front lines. Toishi told the talking cat that he wanted a more durable weapon. Louis inquired about their budget, and the young man asked Marl what she planned to buy. She replied that she was interested in a light crossbow she could use. After choosing everything they needed, Toishi asked for a discount, but the cat responded that he would give them 24 crossbow bolts as a favor. Although it was a meager offer, the young people had no choice but to accept it. Marl chose a crossbow, and Louis offered Toishi a combat staff, almost identical to his previous one and very useful. Marl took the crossbow in her hands and felt like a true adventurer, becoming much more confident. She wasn't afraid to embark on any journey because Toishi-san was by her side. After this, Toishi spent a considerable amount of time training. Among other things, he sparred with Ethan, crossing swords. It seemed Marl had also been training well with other adventurers. While it couldn't be said that Toishi was definitively stronger than Marl, the fact that Marl was getting stronger was undeniable. Toishi's level steadily increased thanks to his training. He could buy skill points and needed to strengthen his magic spells, healing magic, and hone the magical abilities he acquired on his first day in this world. However, if he wanted to get creative, he would have to rely on magic at its most basic level. The young man invested 3 skill points in each, raising his fire, water, and earth magic to the 2nd level. There were various types of skills and levels he could learn using this skill point system. This was his first time in another world called Iliard. A mysterious voice had spoken to him, and there were probably many things he wanted to ask it, like why he had become 19 years old, for example. In any case, he had quite a few skills. He wondered if close combat, archery, and cooking were at level 1 from the start. He noticed that his past world's experience was displayed here. He had learned archery when he was young, negotiations were mastered in the hotel industry, and as for cooking, that was indeed true because he always cooked for himself. In terms of martial arts, level 1 meant an experienced person, level 2 a title holder, level 3 a master class, level 4 a supreme class, and if someone reached level 5, they achieved a superhuman class. This was his status, but Toishi decided not to trust the mysterious voice too much. He saw Marl and called out to her. He suggested she be his partner for magic practice, and Ethan asked him to be gentler with the girl. With a mysterious smile, Toishi declared that there was actually another type of magic he could use, and it needed to be tested on Marl. The young man thought that if he mentioned acquiring some magic through skill points, the girl would start working with him again. When Marl agreed, Toishi ordered her to shoot him with the crossbow. He calmed the surprised girl and she fired. Toishi activated his earth wall magic. The arrow harmlessly embedded itself in the wall just as he expected. This magic lived up to its name, offering strong defense. After that, the young man told Marl to shoot again. Another arrow, fired from the crossbow, was stopped by Toishi's new water wall magic, which simply froze the projectile. It was amazing. If the water wall hit, it would pierce enemies and freeze them from the inside. This was truly a deadly ability. Ethan happily thought how lucky he was that the magic that wounded him wasn't like this. Toishi also possessed fire magic, but Yuza warned the young man that it was very dangerous and he'd be in trouble if the guild hall caught fire. Toishi discovered that magic arrow could be used as pure first-level magic when he tried to shoot it into the sky from his inn window. It seemed that using magic arrows didn't require any attributes. Even though it was only first-level magic, this ability was more dangerous than attribute magic. Pure magic seemed quite viable, and in that case he could easily raise it to the second level. After that, he decided to raise his recovery magic to the second level. First level recovery magic was healing, while second level was detoxifying poisons, including alcohol. However, the most important skill for Toishi at the moment was his appraisal eye, and he was also bothered by the question, who was Marl really? The girl noticed his gaze and asked why he was looking at her so seriously. Toishi asked again why she became an adventurer, and Marl repeated her answer. She was the first princess of a certain country, and they tried to marry her off to a scoundrel prince from a neighboring country, so she ran away from home. She didn't want to return home, but in 3 years her younger sister would replace her as that prince's wife, and then she could go back. Toishi used his newly acquired appraisal eye skill and saw that Marl's real name was Marielle Vlank Misgronia, the first princess of the country of Misgronia. Toishi was stunned and didn't even know what to do. He remembered how he, a simple adventurer, had spent more than one night with a real princess. Now he was sure that Marl was still hiding something from him. She worried about knights and mercenaries, but the fact that she left a noble country was undeniable. Marl said that Toishi-san was going to continue being an adventurer and get stronger, that he would become a feudal lord and aim for a harem. The young man wasn't against such a plan, but why was this coming from the girl's mouth? Could something like a harem be acceptable to Marl? From his perspective, he thought there was nothing unusual about a male adventurer having multiple wives. Adventurers' children possessed excellent genes, and they often inherited their parents' high qualities. Toishi still didn't understand the common things of this world, and Marl explained that adventurers, often facing life-threatening situations, died quite easily. Since the physical pressure was too high, it was hard to cope alone. But the girl confessed that she was very jealous and therefore wouldn't tolerate it if her first partner, Toishi-san, could be stolen by someone else. She doesn't say things like that to anyone but Toishi. Marl seemed quite cute to the young man, so he hugged and kissed her. Marl was so touched she almost burst into tears. She fell onto the bed. When Toishi leaned over her, she asked if he wouldn't let her sleep again tonight, and the young man replied that it depended on her. Later, after the girl fell asleep, Toishi thought that if she were ever pursued, they would run away together. He was determined to make this girl happy. Toishi gained a new skill, archery, and decided to pick up Marl's light crossbow to try and lift his spirits. Training this way can grant a new skill, and to save points, it would be better to learn it from the start through training. Just then, Marl ran up to him and informed him that they had received a goblin extermination quest. The guild was packed with people. It seemed many new quests had come in. Toishi had already gained popularity among adventurers, who called him a wizard. The young man believed this was because he had been practicing magic for the past few days, which might have made him stand out, and come to think of it, he hadn't seen any other wizards at the guild's training grounds. It seemed they, along with the Night Order and other squads, were going to eliminate the goblins, and Toishi didn't think this quest would be difficult. Ust assigned the task of locating all the goblins this time. They were to attack a goblin village in the forest, about half a day's walk from the city. The reward for eliminating each goblin was 5 large copper coins. Additionally, the guild offered 2 silver coins per person for participating in this extermination operation, but Ust warned that he wouldn't pay anyone who didn't contribute. The gathering was scheduled for tonight after the night bell rang. They might have to spend the entire night in the forest, and the mission could take about 2 days, so everyone needed to bring food. Ust reminded them that the guild's counter sold excellent canned goods at a low price. Toishi and Marl decided to prepare thoroughly for the quest. They bought 3 days' worth of canned food as well as several spare blankets, and a lantern would also be useful for this mission. A barrel of water followed into the storage. After a moment's thought, Toishi added 2 more. Ust was very surprised by the capacity of Toishi's magic box. The young man explained that he never takes too many things, so it's never completely full, and he doesn't even know its exact capacity. Finally, it was time to set off. Quite a few adventurers, as well as members of the Knightly Order, had gathered at the designated location. Toishi was confident in their success because they had gradually leveled up during their training, increasing the number of weapons they could wield, and Marl had acquired archery skills. Therefore, Mitsubo Toishi eagerly awaited the adventures that lay ahead. Toishi's magic is a skill system capable of creating a fire blade, and he wanted to learn how to fight a real wizard. It would be great to see her abilities. Meanwhile, the detachment set off. A level 10 scout, a veteran adventurer, led the way, followed by the main block of knights. The newcomers and the column covered a certain distance almost without problems, with only a few attacks from weak monsters. The knights protected the detachments from the front, while the others covered the rear. This troop arrangement protected them, the mages, but it was strange that previously, when encountering goblins, they tried to split them up, attacking only a few units. Now the goblin attacks were unexpected. Just then, a huge horde of goblins was spotted, and everyone was given the command to prepare. Sounds of approaching monsters were heard. It seemed the front line hadn't held. Toishi turned to Marl and asked her not to rush ahead. Goblins appeared ahead, charging to attack the adventurers. Toishi, along with everyone else, engaged in close combat with the monsters, dispatching them one after another. But then, Toishi noticed with surprise that the goblins were barely engaging in combat, running past them. Marl suggested they were fleeing from something. Marl had a danger detection skill, and it seemed she had found something. This something was much stronger than the goblins. The adventurers heard a wild scream ahead. They saw a dead adventurer and concluded that whatever was chasing the goblins was capable of attacking a human and killing them with a single blow. Compared to goblins, this creature was a true monster. Toishi reassured the girl and promised that everything would be all right. As the screams and shouts grew closer, Toishi asked Marl to rely on her own knowledge. The girl explained that it was a creature that preys on goblins, shrouded in mystery. It was a troll. A terrifying roar and heavy footsteps announced the appearance of a dangerous foe before them. Everyone had previously thought this quest was just a goblin hunt, and no one expected the current situation. Toishi warned one of the adventurers who had approached the wounded about the danger. The adventurers and knights launched a flank and rear attack on the monster, assuming the troll was strong but not agile. They hoped to exploit this, but the counterattack didn't work, and the monster was only slightly wounded. The attackers themselves suffered losses in the form of injured comrades. The leader urged the adventurers not to let their guard down as they had lost knights, and he called for everyone to retreat. Toishi disagreed with this decision because Marl had told him about the troll's weaknesses. It recovers almost instantly from minor injuries, so the young man decided to use fire magic. Its regeneration wouldn't be able to handle powerful fire, so Toishi aimed a fire arrow at the troll. The leader was astonished that Toishi possessed fire magic, and with one strike, he stopped the monster's regeneration. A terrifying roar from the troll and the clang of the knight's armor filled the air. Toishi activated an energy burst, and a deafening explosion erupted. A counterattack was launched against the wounded monster. The leader, using the adventurer's shields, found himself in close proximity to the troll with a sword in hand. The troll was killed. The coordinated technique of using shields as steps allowed them to defeat the large monster. The knight leader finished off the troll with great skill. He thanked Toishi for the excellent support and said that thanks to him, they got away with minimal losses. But that wasn't all. 3 more monsters appeared before the astonished fighters. Toishi concentrated his magical power and directed an energy burst towards the monsters. The knight leader stepped forward and, through the cries of the wounded trolls, ordered the injured to retreat. Suddenly, he saw the mage Toishi step forward. The young man thought that even though this monster was bigger, its vulnerable points were the same as a human's, so he should aim for the head. He aimed a blow at one of them, and the strike hit its mark. However, 2 more appeared next to the fallen monster, forcing the adventurers to retreat. One of the trolls' attacks nearly landed, but Toishi skillfully dodged the blow and delivered a powerful strike to the beast's head with his weapon. Yet another enormous monster stood before him. It seemed there would be no end to them. Unfortunately, Toishi's battle staff was stuck in the previous monster's head, and he couldn't pull it out. Fighting such an opponent without a weapon was dangerous. The situation was taking a critical turn. Toishi only had his dagger and his magic left, and though his powers were limited, he could still escape the battlefield. Suddenly, he saw a crossbow bolt embedded in the monster's paw. It was Marl shooting from close range, trying to create an opportunity for Toishi to retreat. But because of this, the monster shifted its attention to Marl, so the young man concentrated the last of his magic on his dagger, intending to deliver a decisive blow. He put all his remaining strength into that strike. A terrible screech rang out, and Toishi saw that his dagger was broken. He had no more weapons and was left with only the option to channel magic into his fist. Then Toishi wound up and punched his opponent. The monster was defeated, and Toishi sadly looked at his broken dagger, but fortunately his staff was intact. Marl, in tears, threw her arms around Toishi's neck. She thought he was badly injured because he was covered in blood. Toishi reassured the girl, used healing magic, and scolded her for not following his order to run away. He patted her head and told her that he had managed to keep his promise this time too, as he had told her he would protect her no matter what. Marl burst into tears of happiness, and Toishi breathed a sigh of relief. Ethan appeared and asked for permission to also pat the girl's head. This time, it seemed everything was over. The knights had also dealt with the trolls, and the goblins seemed to have calmed down. However, 3 adventurers died and 7 were injured, 5 of them seriously. 6 knights sustained moderate injuries and the rest had minor ones, but strength cannot be assessed by injury statistics alone. Ethan shook Toishi's hand, and Toishi said that participants in the same quest should always help each other. He added that he felt like he didn't even have the strength to hold a spear, and asked if he could heal it with recovery magic. Sitting by the burning campfire, Toishi apologized for not being able to fully heal his wound, and Ethan regretted that the sorceress couldn't heal him. Marl brought water and thanked Toishi for his hard work, noting that they had used healing magic countless times and couldn't relax yet. Toishi was glad that the 3 barrels of clean water he had collected at the guild helped him with the healing. Even the seriously wounded were easily restored, and now they could return along the same route without problems. In the battle with the last troll, Toishi desperately tried to protect Marl. He used magical power on his body instead of a weapon. It was a magical fist skill, and it had now become stronger. 6 trolls attacked them, and he killed half of them alone, so he could now expect a significant share of the reward. Toishi sat on a log next to Marl and was happy. The leader of the Crossroads Knights, first Captain Waltz, and the commander of the mage platoon, Lynette, approached the mage and thanked him for his invaluable help in the battle. Waltz admitted that thanks to him, they defeated the trolls with minimal losses and said that his strength was worthy of an A rank. The young man stated that he was only an E rank adventurer, as he had only become one 10 days ago, and this was only his second quest. Lynette looked at the young man incredulously and thought he was joking, while the captain exclaimed how much training it must have taken to become such an adventurer. Toishi replied that masters in the village taught him how to use magic and how to fight. In fact, he came from another world and somehow a strange voice helped him. Waltz extended his hand to Toishi and said that his success greatly helped his knights, adding that if he wanted a reward, he should leave his contact information. The young man replied that he would be near the central square in the southern district, at the Blazing Tavern, and that the goblin extermination quest was now fully complete. Just in case, several knights went out to scout after dawn, but the goblin village was found to be completely destroyed. Apparently, the trolls did it, meaning the first goblins simply fled their attack. Some died, but they survived, and that was a victory. Now everything was fine. Lynette approached the young man and said that the knights had taken notice of him, but Toishi couldn't understand what that meant. The girl advised him not to associate with such people, and Toishi replied that he had already decided not to join them. Even though he had come to another world and shed many things, he didn't really trust the knights, and Marl was worried about them. Was there some connection here? He was missing something. What was going on in this kingdom? Meanwhile, in this kingdom, and not just in the kingdom of Calendale, but throughout the entire world of Iliard, there existed a possessor of immense power. This was the voice of God, but who was this mysterious voice? Toishi knew nothing about how to maintain freedom in another world. After a deadly battle with monsters, the adventurers returned to the guild, where they were met with kindness and joy. Toishi and Marl watched with curiosity as the townspeople smiled genuinely at them. The townspeople were grateful to them because safety had now returned to the crossroads. In exchange for the adventurers' lives, the people of Crossroads must be protected. That's what knights are for, but one question bothered Waltz. Should he report Marl to the guild? The girl was on a multi-day raid for the first time and was understandably tired. Ethan suggested that after receiving their reward, the young people should let loose and have a drink at the tavern. Ethan claimed he had killed 1 or 2 goblins. Ust congratulated the adventurers on their return and said he had been worried about them when they went to the goblin village, but fortunately they all came back safe. After all, 3 of their colleagues had still perished. This all happened because of a sudden troll attack. If it weren't for the knights, they would have all died. After that, the old man wanted to check their cards. Toishi asked the master what would happen to the deceased adventurers the knights took away. He was told they would be buried in the city cemetery and their personal belongings would be given to their families. After inspecting Toishi and Marl's cards, Ust found it hard to believe that the mage had destroyed 3 trolls. Ethan confirmed this, stating that he saw with his own eyes how the guy roasted a troll with fire magic. Another adventurer confirmed that he pierced the 2nd troll with his staff, and Marl added that Mr. Toishi tore the last one apart with his bare hands. Toishi felt awkward from the praise, but he was already being called a wizard. He pulled the charred troll corpses out of his magic chest, and no one expected that. The old man joyfully exclaimed that the skin and bones would be used for armor, the fat for alchemists, and the meat would sell for an excellent price, though the downside was that all their heads were damaged. But even so, these trolls were worth a lot, and the guild encouraged adventurers who brought magical monsters specifically to their guild. Since the reward for participating in the raid was 2 silver coins, Ust couldn't give an exact amount yet. But he said that Toishi was due about 30 gold for each troll and another 5 for subduing them. In total, this came to 105 gold, but it was all approximate. Marl was shocked that they would receive so much money for just one quest. Toishi found it hard to even imagine such a sum, as it was incomparable to an adventurer's usual salary. The adventurers celebrated the completion of the quest loudly and joyfully, proposing toasts and drinking their glasses to the bottom. After Toishi received his reward for subduing the trolls, about 20 other adventurers also claimed their participation. The young man stopped at a bar where, for 5 gold coins, you could eat and drink as much as you wanted, which was better than trembling over every coin. The girls showed great interest in Mr. Toishi, eagerly asking about his adventures. The young man also noticed that some of the guys were envious of the situation and announced that the sake and food were completely free for the night. Marl smiled and told the girls who were pestering Toishi that they should keep their hands off him. Late in the evening, Marl and Toishi finally found themselves back home. Marl fell asleep before Toishi even got into bed. He had already gotten used to this life. Before he came to this world and met Marl, he was just an ordinary 29-year-old guy on Earth, repeating the same routine day after day. Here, in the world of Iliard, thanks to this girl, every day was full of adventures, and Marl loved him too. He leaned over to her and said thank you. Marl opened her eyes and replied that even if he said such nice things, staring at other girls was unforgivable. Toishi then asked if she was worried about it. That's exactly how it looked, and he had been worried about her. During the quest, when Marl jumped out, he wanted to stay calm. If Toishi had lost, he would have lost his purpose in this world. Marl happily realized that Toishi cared about her, but the young man asked her not to interrupt. He lay down in her bed and declared that this audacious guy was about to attack her. Late in the morning, Marl was still in bed, and Toishi told her that daybreak was coming soon and it was time for her to get up. The girl then stated that staying awake until morning was cruel and violent. She could get pregnant because of it, but she was an adventurer and her guild used contraceptive magic. Female adventurers could use the guild's service. If necessary, they could get contraceptive magic in advance. A pregnant female adventurer would be forced to stop adventuring in such a situation. Toishi thought something was off here. It was strange. Even if an adventurer got pregnant and the group disbanded, other adventurers would disappear from sight. Finding a new group was quite difficult and many complications arose. This explained everything, and Marl was currently in a group with him, so she must have been through a lot. Marl added that some were lewd demons in human form, which was why most female adventurers studied contraceptive magic. Toishi glanced at the girl's figure and she, blushing, asked what kind of look that was. It was quite normal for adventurers to get married, and it happened all the time. Toishi wondered if he should marry Marl, but he was curious to learn more about her. Today, they needed to find out how much money he would get for the trolls. However, before that, he asked Marl out on a date and told her to get dressed quickly. After that, the girl clung to his arm and they headed to the guild. But Marl noticed they were going to a weapon shop instead. Toishi explained that he had broken his dagger in yesterday's battle, and an adventurer was useless without a weapon. Levisan the cat greeted the young people and asked Toishi what he needed this time. The young man explained that he needed a sword capable of withstanding his magic, and he had 10 gold coins. A short sword displayed on the counter caught the young people's attention. It looked very elegant, and Toishi suggested Marl look at a new crossbow that she should like. Toishi had to choose between 2 swords, as the other weapons were significantly more expensive. The mithril sword had a large handguard. Its blade was straight, rigid, and durable. Rumors said it wouldn't melt and possessed great magical power. This meant that even if he imbued it with his own magic, it wouldn't break, and the young man really liked this blade. He turned to Levis and asked if he could get a small discount since he was buying such a cool sword, and the cat asked about the mithril dagger he had been looking at earlier. Levis exclaimed that Toishi would bankrupt him, as that dagger contained a wind magic pearl, and its power made movements faster and weapons lighter. Levis informed him that instead of 25 coins for both items, he was willing to sell them for 24 if that helped. Toishi laid 24 coins on the table, and the cat was surprised he had so much money, to which the young man explained that he had sold the carcasses of 3 trolls and believed they would appear on the market soon. When he and Marl were outside, the girl asked what kind of sword he had acquired, and he replied that he was eager to test it. Marl also happily thought that Toishi had bought the dagger for her. The girl happily skipped along the pavement, and Toishi asked where she was going. Marl reminded him that he had promised her a date. At the Concerned Knights Guild, First Captain Waltz reported that the objective of the Crossroads Guild Knights on this expedition was goblins. In addition to them, trolls were killed, and the man he was referring to was named Mitsubo Toishi. Meanwhile, Marl and Toishi strolled carefree through the city streets, and the young man treated her to some delicious ice cream. Afterward, Marl expressed a desire to get a little dressed up. Toishi accessed his storage to make some room for the clothes they would buy, as he also wanted to see Marl in cute outfits. They went through all the shops where the girl picked out the outfits she liked. They had a lot of fun. Marl was overjoyed. She hadn't shopped like that in a long time, while Toishi felt tired, having overdone it a bit. He was also surprised that most shops in this world sold used clothes. Tailoring clothes was expensive, and ordinary people bought clothes when they could make their own and sold them when others wanted to buy. It was a kind of closed loop. They bought so many clothes that they absolutely had to wear them that evening. Marl really wanted to dress up in a dancer's costume. Then Toishi pulled out a dagger he had bought at the store and handed it to Marl, stating it was another gift for her. Marl was very touched by this offering. The young man asked her to accept the gift without objection, and Marl gratefully took it. Suddenly, the people around them rushed over to congratulate them. Toishi found what was happening around them a bit strange. Perhaps it was some custom he wasn't familiar with. At the inn, they were met by Huipinya, who had heard about Toishi's gift to Marl. She mysteriously asked Marl if she was happy, as it was a mithril proposal. Huipinya recalled that when she received a mithril proposal from her husband, she simply melted. She explained that the owner of the blazing anvil was her husband. Marl had no idea that Huipinya was the owner's daughter. Toishi apologized for interrupting the girl's conversation, but asked what the significance and meaning of a mithril gift was. The girls exchanged mysterious and puzzled glances. Huipinya rudely asked the young man why he had given Marl the dagger, and he replied that he thought she liked it. After these words, Marl started to cry. Toishi hugged the girl and said he didn't understand her. Then he turned to Huipinya and asked her to explain everything. The girl replied that when a normal man gives a woman a mithril dagger, it means she will be his and must protect her chastity with that weapon. This gesture turned out to be a proposal, and Toishi hadn't known about it. He offered to have dinner with Marl, but Huipinya declared that she couldn't leave him alone with a girl he had brought to tears. The young man sincerely apologized for making Marl cry, saying he hadn't known the gift would have such a meaning. He added that he apologized for the false proposal, but then caught himself and clarified that he apologized for doing it improperly. He decided to present the gift differently, calm down, and compose himself to act directly. Toishi knelt before Marl and offered her the dagger. The girl clutched the gift to her chest and started crying again. Huipinya said goodbye, stating it was time for her to go, and Toishi asked Marl to stop the flood of tears. The girl hugged Toishi, kissed him, and said she was very happy. They both realized that this night would be a long one. Marl and Toishi woke up late in the morning. Toishi gently kissed the girl, and she asked if she had woken him up. The night had been fun, and now it was time to go for lunch. From the happy expressions on the young couple's faces, Huipinya understood everything, after which she placed an envelope addressed to Toishi on the table. It was an invitation to visit the Crossroad Knights garrison in the kingdom of Calendale, and Marl exclaimed that if the knights were inviting him, it was great. Marl's reaction didn't concern Toishi much. If the knights were their opponents, he would simply ignore the invitation. The young man asked Marl to stay at the guild until he figured out what was happening. Crossroad is one of the cities in the kingdom of Calendale. Every 5 years, a new patron is chosen here. The candidate must be a nobleman with a rank no lower than a count. Marl had told him that within the county, ranks were arranged in descending order: Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, Baron, and Quasi-Baron. The Crossroad Knights garrison was located in the Western District, but for what reason was Toishi summoned here? While the young man awaited further events, he checked his status. He had accumulated several training points, so he raised his overall sword and long weapon skill to 4, increased his morale to level 3, and his magic also rose to level 3. Toishi saw someone approaching him. This person apologized for making him wait and asked to spar with him. Toishi gave the man no chance, and the instructor declared him the winner. The young man asked why they had arranged this training. Those present at the training noted not only his good magic skills but also his swordsmanship. Guys like him were a rarity. Twaning, the leader of the Cross Knights, offered Toishi a position as one of their kendo instructors. The young man told the nobleman that it was a great honor, but he preferred the free and carefree business of an adventurer, and his manners were too rough. Twaning pointed to Instructor Waltz and said that he dealt with adventurers and wanted him to see one for himself. Additionally, they wanted to reward him for exterminating the trolls, but there were legal restrictions on giving money directly, so they offered him a dagger as payment. Toishi carefully took the weapon and activated his appraiser's eye. A simple but beautiful stone was embedded in the dagger. The blade was well made and had an engraved pattern that Toishi couldn't understand. Twaning said with satisfaction that it seemed Toishi liked the dagger, but he had heard that Toishi was skilled in magic, and the young man realized that the true purpose of his visit had not yet been revealed. Marx, the leader of the Cross Knights Magic Corps and an honorary baron, greeted Toishi on behalf of the Royal Guard. The young man recalled that the Magic Cavalry Station was located near the Knights' training grounds. Marx grabbed the young man by his clothes. He suggested they discuss everything together with Mr. Twaning. The Baron pointed to a huge magic orb and stated that it was a status check item that digitized and displayed a person's magical skills and abilities. Toishi wasn't sure if it would be bad for them to learn his skills now, but Marx suggested he place his hand on the crystal ball, as there was no reason to refuse, and the young man boldly extended his hand. Everyone's gaze turned to the magic orb. Toishi's status finally appeared, and at first glance there was nothing special about it, but in reality, it was astounding. A surprised Marx asked the young man where he was from. Toishi replied that he was from Deko and then asked the Baron why he was asking, sensing the conversation was taking a bad turn. Everyone present couldn't believe that this guy was level 12, and his magical power and its quantity were incredible. Additionally, his kendo and long sword skills were at level 4. Could Toishi have been at such a high level even before arriving here? Waltz nervously swallowed. This guy was definitely a hero. When Twaning suggested that Toishi came from a wealthy family, the young man replied that he was mistaken. However, the leader of the Crossroads Knights responded that his origin didn't matter at all. Marx added that every time a good person gains a new level, their ability scores increase by 1 to 3 points. Toishi's magical power was exceptionally high, and having such a stat was abnormal. There was no doubt that Toishi was a hero. The young man was forced to give in and agreed with them, but he asked what happened to those who became heroes. He was told that they acquired a number of responsibilities. Firstly, a hero must report their whereabouts to the guard and the guild, no matter where they are. Additionally, the government can send them requests which they must answer. Government assignments must be fulfilled. Twining informed him that there was also a second, more troublesome duty, but of course, there were also benefits. One of them was free movement. Toishi would be able to travel between countries without hindrance. However, the young man inquired about the details of the second obligation. Marx explained that when performing government assignments, the state he is in covers all expenses. But for example, if he is requested as an adventurer, that request does not count. Toishi expected more restrictions, but it seemed a hero supported not only Calendale but also the country he was in. What kind of dangerous threat was facing this world? Twining looked intently at the young man and said that the country needed a hero's strength and would spare no expense. Most requests involved eliminating troublesome monsters. Toishi asked the leader incredulously if this meant that outside the country, heroes simply acted as a force to combat monsters. The young man looked at Twining's embarrassed face and stated that the count shouldn't think anything bad. He simply didn't want to quarrel with the government. Toishi remembered similar stories in his own world, like the end of a hero. Having secured Toishi's agreement, Twining declared that he would be sent to the capital later to officially register as a hero, and now they should celebrate the birth of a new hero. Mark solemnly told the young man that he was the first hero in Calendale in 50 years, and although it would be difficult, he must do his best. Suddenly, Toishi smelled a strange odor. The young man turned to the mages around him and asked them to tell him a bit about magic, because he was self-taught and knew nothing beyond the 4 basic attributes in pure magic. The professional mages gladly promised to tell him everything, and the young man thought that being a servant in this world was not at all disgusting. But his own life belonged to him, and he would live it as he saw fit. Marl was happy to see Toishi return and asked him what the knights had told him. The young man calmly replied that he had been certified as a hero. That the guild initially didn't believe his story, but Toishi informed him that he would soon have to travel to the capital for official certification, as his status check had confirmed he was a hero. Toishi looked at Marl's worried face and asked her if she was all right. The girl stated that being a hero in this country was a very serious matter and asked if he understood that. Marl moved closer to Toishi, her voice filled with anxiety, and repeated her question. Meanwhile, armed riders in black cloaks and masks were rushing to their destination, the crossroads. Their target was the hero Mitsubo Toishi. Agreed with Marl that being a hero was a big deal, but he couldn't share her anger. Toishi, in turn, couldn't understand why everyone was so serious, so Marl took his hand and led him outside. Heroes are a mutation in the human race. Rumors say there's one for every hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. Their physical strength is normal, but their magical power is 2 to 6 times higher than an ordinary person's. According to a treaty signed 500 years ago, heroes don't belong to any specific state. They are a global force against threats to humanity, and every country participates in protecting and supporting them. The Demon King who conquered the world in the past was also a hero. When Toishi and Marl returned home, the girl sat on the bed with a quiet sigh. Toishi admitted that he didn't know what it was like to be a hero in this country. They fight the strongest monsters beyond national borders, and in fact, it's a system designed to eliminate heroes because they are uncontrollable. Marl confirmed that heroes are unwelcome in society because it's believed that one hero is comparable in strength to an entire country's army, posing a serious danger to any nation. If a hero with such power were to cause unrest, the army would be powerless, and if they also gained the support of citizens, they could easily overthrow any ruler. Therefore, the royal family and nobles fear heroes. For them, it's safer to eliminate the uncontrollable ones as soon as possible, and the enemy's first move will likely be reconnaissance. Toishi could barely believe it. So, these people were deliberately committing murder, and the real reason there hadn't been any heroes in Calendale for the past 50 years was that the kingdom secretly eliminated them before they could even be registered. He had heard this story once, and now Marl's reaction made sense to him. But why go to such lengths? Even if he wasn't very familiar with the traditions and beliefs of this country, one of them stated that some deeply religious nobles believed heroes disrupted the world's harmony. Were there anti-heroes who hunted heroes? Faith in God and protection of the royal family, that's how the kingdom had been killing adventurers certified as heroes for over 50 years. Even though Marl belonged to another country's royal family, her authority here was significant. Taishi wasn't going to let them kill him for such a reason. He directly asked the girl if she really thought they would come to kill him, and Marl replied that it was a possibility. What did he plan to do now? The young man was also thinking about this. His skill statuses were already noted. Based on this information, they should combine forces and he still had a chance. If Kalendale had sent assassins after him, he needed to do something immediately. Toishi turned to Marl and asked if defeating monsters helped level up and if leveling up made one stronger. The girl confirmed this statement. Strength increases significantly with each level up, and the young man with a smirk said he had an idea. Marl guessed and asked if he planned to use his strength to protect himself. Toishi replied that she hit the nail on the head. They would go monster hunting right away. He needed to get stronger and increase his deterrence. Moreover, this would reduce the risk of Marl being taken hostage. If you can't overcome power, you have to use cunning. Toishi declared that he was going on an expedition and invited the girl to follow him. Marl replied that wherever Mr. Toishi went, she would go too. She intended not only to follow him, but also to improve her skills during the expedition. The girl immediately pulled out her dagger, ready to go with Toishi. The young people embraced, and the young man apologized for getting her involved in all of this. If they acted carelessly, all of Kalendale would turn against them. Perhaps approaching the knights was his mistake from the start, but Marl advised the young man not to dwell on it, as he was no longer alone. He thanked the girl for supporting him and said he was so happy he could cry right now. Toishi stated that he needed to buy weapons and maintenance supplies, food, and magical items. Then he asked the girl how difficult it was to merge with the guild, and she replied that it was impossible. The guild is subordinate to the kingdom. The main purpose of creating the guild is to identify heroes, use adventurers to kill monsters, and also identify heroes who achieve outstanding results, control the population, develop human resources, ensure security, and provide cheap labor. These solutions are effective across many criteria. Whoever came up with this system is incredibly smart. Toishi informed Marl that they were escaping immediately and needed to take only the essentials, even though he hadn't paid for this lodging yet. Hoipinya guessed that he was going to rent a house in the city. She assumed Toishi had proposed to Marl and was now going to settle down somewhere in the city. Hoipinya asked where they intended to live. Toishi replied at the crossroads and promised to contact her as soon as he could sort things out. They would leave tomorrow at dawn. Toishi believed it would be several days before the assassins realized they had escaped from the crossroads. He and Marl left the crossroads in the morning. The young man generously stocked up on camp supplies, spending about 50 gold in just an hour. They were attentive and cautious as they moved through the city streets. Fortunately, the city gates were open, and the numerous chatter of citizens could be heard near the fortress wall. First, Toishi decided to get out of the reach of the knights of the crossroads. Marl suggested heading to the southeast forest. Rumor has it that deep within the large forest are ancient ruins, and if they pass through the forest, they will soon reach the kingdom of Miscronia. Toishi was now firmly convinced that Marl was from that kingdom. The kingdom of Miscronia, unlike other countries, strives to protect heroes. According to historical sources, the ancestors of the royal family were also heroes, as were many aristocrats, making it an ideal country for people like them. All of this was getting more and more interesting. Toishi and Marl made their way towards the ancient ruins. On the very first day of their escape, the young people began training. Toishi gave Marl instructions on how to fight monsters. It was the first time the girl had fought a boar one-on-one. Toishi noted that Marl dodged the monster's attack very well, but her own attack left much to be desired. Perhaps she was afraid of hurting a living creature. Finally, she managed to take down the boar, which roared and collapsed to the ground. Marl asked Toishi how he thought her fight went, and the young man advised her to learn how to handle a dagger better. As the sun began to set, the young people started looking for a place to spend the night. Marl expressed concern that predators might attack them, as their location was very close to the forest. However, before fleeing the city, Toishi had asked the guild for some useful camp magic, a level 3 magic barrier and a level 2 magic power increase and mana recovery. Toishi activated the magic shield spell. He stuck his staff into the ground near where they planned to spend the night. They were now inside a magic circle that reliably protected them from all sorts of predators. Marl was stunned, and the young man explained that this magic was tangible, so she could touch the shield and they would be safe inside. It would even withstand a troll attack. Then Toishi suggested they eat something and took food out of his storage. It was steak, salted meat, vegetables, and soup. The fugitives ate with appetite. While preparing the seasonings, Marl enjoyed cooking and the presence of her beloved. She declared that she was a food taster. Wrapping the meat in bread made it twice as delicious, and the young people joked around as they ate dinner. The food tasted much better outdoors, and Toishi enjoyed Marl's company, forgetting all his troubles. Then he bitterly thought that no matter what, they were now traitors to the state. After 3 days of monster hunting, Toishi reached level 16 and Marl reached level 7. Now they could take down goblins in no time. Marl mastered new sword skills, while the young man acquired skills like stealth and awareness. The princess's scouting and survival skills also improved. Toishi also gained the magic eye skill and poison resistance level 3, and he saved some skill points just in case. By the end of the 3rd day, the young people reached ancient ruins. It resembled an ancient temple, very beautiful, but there were no signs of life anywhere. It was strange that no one had settled here yet, perhaps because the area around the temple was a sanctuary and the barrier installed in ancient times was still active. The young people carefully examined the ruins. There were only skeletons everywhere. It seemed they had all prayed before dying, but there were no injuries on them, which was odd. Suddenly, Toishi called out to the girl and showed her a ring he found among the ruins, which seemed to increase magical power. The young man suggested that there must be a treasure trove here. Besides monster hunting, treasure hunting was another significant source of income for adventurers. After wandering through the ruins, Toishi found a few more useful items, but then noticed that Marl wasn't feeling well. She stated that perhaps these found items were cursed. There were quite a lot of found items, a whole mountain of them. Marl shivered and said she couldn't take things from corpses, but Toishi pointed out that the dead wouldn't need them anymore, and taking them was part of the burial service. Toishi chose an enhancement ring for himself and suggested Marl take something for magic. He wondered if he could put all of it into a non-magical storage to sell later, but he also had more interesting ideas. Toishi picked out a beautiful ring and told the girl to put it on her finger. After that, they prayed, standing among the ancient ruins. Toishi and Marl discovered a statue among the ancient ruins and assumed it was a god worshipped by ancient people, but the girl expressed doubt about this. Perhaps it was a god worshipped in the past but no longer, something an ancient civilization specialist might know. Unfortunately, the young people were not familiar with such knowledge. Suddenly, the light above the ruins dimmed, and Toishi and Marl couldn't tell if it was an illusion or something else. Ghostly figures of people reached out to them, urging them to send someone their way. Then one of the figures brandished a dagger, stabbed themselves in the chest, and cried out for them to send a hero. No one could understand what was happening. The spectral people demanded a hero and were killing themselves with their own weapons. Toishi looked in bewilderment at one of the girls, bleeding just a step away from him. A boy hung in the air and addressed Toishi as a hero. The young man couldn't make out his face at all. Finally, the vision disappeared and the young people took a deep breath. It had been a very strange sight. Toishi asked Marl if all heroes in the past were summoned by such rituals, and the girl replied that heroes are simply talented individuals who are rarely born, and they can't just be summoned so easily. In this world, the strongest are heroes, people with mutations, summoned from another world, but who was the hero these ghostly people were calling for? Toishi and Marl lay down on the ground, exhausted with no clues. Toishi wondered why people built this temple and who that boy was, but a mystery is called a mystery because it can't be solved without hints. Perhaps he could solve it if he started acting like in regular games. He too could have been summoned, just like that hero. On the day they first met, Toishi didn't find himself near the crossroads. There was no one around. He only had a little money and minimal belongings, so he decided to become an adventurer. He touched Marl's shoulder and confessed that he wasn't from this world. Before this, he lived in a completely different world, a peaceful world without monsters or magic, where there had been no wars for 50 years. Did she know about this? Marl calmly replied that no matter how unusual he was, she would always follow him. She stroked the young man's hand and declared that he was the most precious person to her. Toishi thought that if this moment could last forever, he would be the happiest man. Suddenly, his ear caught the distinctive sound of a flying arrow, then he saw it pierce Marl's chest. It happened so suddenly, and Toishi cried out in despair. Meanwhile, the ambushers continued to fire arrows. Toishi put up a wind shield, stopping the enemy's arrows. These were people in black cloaks and masks covering their faces. Toishi pleaded with Marl not to die and to hold on. When the assassins reached their target's campsite, they found no one there. It seemed Toishi and the girl had escaped. Toishi, indeed, carrying Marl in his arms, ran towards the city to throw off their pursuers, but somehow they managed to quickly catch up. The young man was about to treat the girl's wounds a bit. But Marl was in very bad shape. She didn't even open her eyes. Toishi laid her down next to a stone pillar. Pulling the arrow from her wound, he realized it was poisoned, guaranteeing a fatal outcome. It seemed Marl was dead. A black wave of grief crashed over Toishi, as Marl was everything to him. The girl who had unexpectedly appeared before him when he arrived in this world, this runaway girl, had made him who he was now. He loved the carefree, free-spirited Marl more than anything in the world. He had never known such warmth, having someone who thought of him all the time. She could love and accept him for who he was. There was no one else like Marl, neither in this world nor another. Perhaps he had come to this world only to meet her. Now he felt no desire to live. He only prayed to God for Marl to open her eyes. The assassins surrounded Toishi, believing they had reached their target and that his end had come. The young man looked up at his killers and realized they were the same monsters who had killed his Marl. Toishi fearlessly charged at the superior enemy forces, and they assumed the guy had decided to willingly let them kill him. In the young man's inflamed mind, there was only one thought: to avenge his Marl. The crowd of assassins was already very close. Their leader laughed and said it seemed this fool had decided to take them on alone, but what could he do by himself? Toishi didn't care. His mind was consumed by an immense darkness, and all he wanted was to finish everyone off. These were the very people who had killed his beloved Marl, and his rage was enough to slaughter them all. The assassins suffered a brutal assault unlike anything they had ever experienced. The image of the deceased Marl in his mind's eye multiplied Toishi's strength tenfold. As the rain began to fall, Toishi returned to the lifeless body of his beloved. The sky erupted in an incredible thunderstorm, matching the intensity of the fury that had helped the young man wipe out the entire squad of assassins. Only one assassin remained, and Toishi approached her to finish her off as well. Toishi pressed the tip of his sword against the masked girl's throat. The thought that these monsters had killed his dear Marl endlessly pounded in his head. The assassin tried to flee, but the mage activated his ice bullet magic, and the villainess collapsed. The magic froze her movements, leaving her unable to even twitch. Toishi picked her up and tore the mask from her face. He asked the girl if they had come to kill him, and if so, they should have been prepared to be killed themselves. Hearing her plea for mercy, Toishi decided not to kill her if she told him the whole truth. Toishi used magic to make the assassin feel pain. He told her that if she tried anything, he would kill her instantly. Now she had to tell him everything. Whether she spoke or not, it didn't matter. He would kill her anyway. The girl replied that the assassination squad of the Kingdom of Kalendale had been ordered to kill the hero Toishi Mitsubo. Initially, they were chosen from the Order of Knights and trained, forming a special operations unit. Upon completing their training, they were given the name the Cleaners. Toishi pondered that even though they were a special operations unit, they were still part of the kingdom's army. Could the kingdom have ordered their elimination? The mercenary replied that the assassination squad, specifically designed to kill the hero, was created by the nobility. Toishi asked how they managed to pinpoint their location so quickly, and the captive responded that they were informed the head of the knightly order had given them a hunting knife, and by following it, they were able to reach these ruins. She explained that the knife was made using a secret sealing technique. Most likely, there's a special pattern on the hilt of his sword, a rune that allows them to pinpoint its location. Toishi was surprised by how easily this criminal revealed everything. Now, this woman was of no use. Marl was dead, and this killer also had to disappear, so the young man grabbed her by the throat with both hands. Now he lived in this world only for revenge, and nothing else mattered to his life. Suddenly, Toishi heard a faint sound of footsteps behind him. He looked back and, to his astonishment, saw Marl stumbling towards him. The young man picked Marl up in his arms and held her close to his chest. He was surprised that she had survived, and the girl said she didn't understand how it happened either. She pointed to the ring they found in the ruins and suggested that perhaps she survived thanks to this enchanted ring. Using his magic eye, Toishi discovered that this divine ring could provide protection from a fatal outcome only once. Toishi's joy and happiness knew no bounds. He gently hugged the girl and kissed her, grateful to God for this miraculous salvation. Marl looked at the numerous corpses of the assassins scattered among the ruins of the ancient temple and realized that Toishi had done this. He reassured the girl, telling her that everything was fine now, as he would always protect her from anything. The young couple embraced again, and Toishi told Marl that everything would be all right now. At that moment, a squad of knights in Waltz approached the temple ruins. Waltz rushed to the hero and asked if he was all right. Then he saw the dead bodies of the criminals and the bound girl. Toishi took his sword and, addressing the captain, said that he shouldn't pretend to be an innocent lamb, as the kingdom's order of knights had sent assassins after him. Waltz, surprised, said he had no idea what Toishi was talking about. The hero grabbed the captive girl by her hair and said that this woman had come for his head. She was a professional assassin from the Royal Order of Knights named Furamu Forces. He had managed to eliminate the other 12 assassins, and the surprised captain stated that, of course, he had every right to be angry, but he wished Toishi would try to understand that the kingdom of Kalendale was not only trying to harm him but also trying to protect him. Toishi, with an ironic smile, added that if the assassin squad failed its mission, then Waltz was supposed to come and trick him into a truce. Was that their plan? The captain exclaimed that he had misunderstood everything, but Toishi continued, saying it seemed the country's knights were plotting schemes as treacherous as assassins. It was like meeting at a crossroads, suggesting a joint journey and then killing your partner in their sleep. How could he trust anything anymore? Weren't they just pawns in the hands of the Kalendale kingdom? Toishi drew a magic circle in the air and declared he would kill them all. Marl swiftly rushed towards the young man, stopping him from acting. She asked Toishi to calm down, saying she understood it was hard for him to trust knights now, but making an enemy of the Kalendale kingdom was unacceptable. She suggested he could try to believe Captain Waltz again. Weren't they comrades who had defeated the troll together? Toishi decided there was some truth in Marl's words. After all, the captain was their battle comrade. Meanwhile, Marl asked the captain if they could trust him. Waltz knelt on one knee and swore an oath on his own sword. As Toishi and Marl headed into the forest after leaving the ruins, they managed to disperse the magical items they had conveniently found, and thus they returned to the city. Toishi inquired about the condition of the surviving assassin and was informed that her wounds had been healed with healing magic. However, she had a hysterical fit and wouldn't let anyone near her. This was a completely expected reaction. Despite being a professional assassin, she had failed her mission. Toishi didn't know who the leader of these assassins was, and he wondered what the head of the nobility was even thinking. Furamu forces, of course, should be tried and receive appropriate punishment. Toishi believed the best solution would be to hand this assassin over to them. Marl seemed to feel a little sorry for the girl. Ethan greeted Toishi with a joyful exclamation, as they hadn't seen each other in a long time. He looked at the young people in confusion and asked the hero what had happened. Then Ethan awkwardly apologized, figuring he had probably interrupted his date with the beautiful woman. He left, expressing a desire to go on a mission together again someday. Toishi had grown unaccustomed to such everyday life and idle chatter. He felt his current self drifting further and further away from it all. Ust at the guild was relieved that the young people were all right, admitting he had started to worry a bit. Toishi noticed that the old man had lost some weight. He wondered if Ust, working there, was also connected to the Kalendale kingdom's subordinates and if he was truly as worried as he claimed. Meanwhile, Ust gave the young man a reward for the various materials Toishi had gathered in the ruins and thanked him for his work. The old man asked what Toishi planned to do that day, and the young man replied that he intended to rest all evening because he needed to visit the knight's order tomorrow morning. After that, Ust returned their adventurer cards. He informed them that Toishi was now a D-rank adventurer and Marl was E-rank, congratulating them both. The old man inquired about his plans as an adventurer, and the young man responded that he first wanted to see how things would go for him personally. Everything would depend on how this country presented itself in the future. Toishi grimly thought that if it weren't for that ring, Marl would be dead right now. This wasn't something simple to just forgive. Ust then asked him what he would do if he sensed trouble, and the young man replied that he would simply leave the country, though he wasn't sure if the country would let him escape so easily. Then, after a moment of thought, he declared that if that happened, he would start an all-out war. Hoipinya was slightly surprised that the young people had returned, as they hadn't seen each other in over a week. She assumed Marl and Toishi had come to eat, but the young man stated they were there to stay the night, they just wanted to sleep. When the girl asked why they hadn't rented a house, Toishi replied that it was a lie and that certain events had simply occurred. Huipinya happily offered them the same room they had stayed in before. The young people blissfully settled into bed as they were very tired. Toishi sadly reflected that just a week ago everything was quiet and peaceful. In this very room they had chatted about silly things and played around. If he had only focused on earning money or training, and if he had only thought about Marl, things might have turned out differently. Toishi looked at his hands and thought about how he had killed 12 people with them. However, they had tried to do the same to him and wanted to take away someone dear to him, so naturally he would want revenge. It was his freedom and his right. Lying in bed with his eyes closed, Toishi tried to convince himself that he wasn't a bad person. Since he had come to another world, he thought he could live freely, without any rules, so why shouldn't he get used to this feeling? Had all his actions led to this because he was recognized as a hero, causing the country to pursue him and assassins to target his life? And because Marl fled with him, she had to put her own life at risk. He wistfully thought that if he hadn't taken on the quest at the beginning, if he hadn't defeated the troll at that moment, everything would have been different. If he hadn't thought he was the main character of a fantasy world, this wouldn't have happened. Why did it turn out this way? Toishi felt remorse. Marl woke up and asked the young man why he was sitting in the dark. She was apparently still upset about Toishi killing those people. And even though she understood he did it for her, she never wanted anything like that to happen, and if she had known it could, she would have made a different decision. If Marl hadn't chosen Toishi, things might have turned out better, and she wouldn't have had to flee the city. Toishi opened his eyes and screamed. He had dreamed that Marl died. He saw the girl there and realized it was just a dream. Marl asked him if he was okay. Marl mentioned that she had just woken up and decided to go to the kitchen for some water. Toishi, in a terrible mood, sat on the edge of the bed and asked the girl if she was disappointed in him. Marl sat next to him and asked why he asked her that. The hero said that he had killed people with his own hands because he thought she was dead, and that's why he took the lives of 12 people. Surely even murderers have families, brothers and sisters, loved ones, and despite that he killed them. He ended their existence. He did something that could never be undone. Marl gently hugged the young man and said that he did it for her protection, and if she were in his shoes, she would most likely think the same way, so he shouldn't blame himself for it. In reality, the only one to blame for this was her, to which Toishi said that was foolishness. He declared that it wasn't true and she shouldn't say that, and the girl replied that she had been very scared. Toishi, at that moment, gave in to his feelings and started destroying everything in his path. Giving in to emotions was not the answer. He probably understood that at the time. He had lost consciousness and likely wouldn't have woken up until he had destroyed something. The young people hugged each other tightly and held on close. Marl, stroking Toishi's head, soothingly said that she would always be by his side. Toishi confessed to Marl that he had completely fallen apart, sitting before her and crying, while she comforted and forgave him no matter what, even though his companion was a girl who had lived only half of what he had. From the perspective of his former self, this was unthinkable. The young man asked Marl for forgiveness. The girl replied that if you looked at everything from the beginning, it wouldn't be hard to understand that the root of their problems lay with her. But Toishi interrupted her and said he was glad she was alive. But at the same time, he felt terribly guilty towards her, because this whole situation happened only because of his actions, and despite all that, she continued to forgive him. Marl tapped Toishi on the forehead and gave him an encouraging look. She told him that her Toishi-san wasn't some crybaby or a wimp. He was the hero she admired so much, and if he couldn't realize that himself, then he had big problems. Toishi suddenly understood everything. Marl truly was who she was, and she supported his heart so deeply and strongly that he would be grateful to her for it his entire life. Then Marl mentioned that he wasn't from this world and that people said he might be the prophesied hero. She was very happy that Toishi had told her about himself, because before, whenever she wanted to know more about him, he always acted cold. Toishi himself couldn't believe he had ever been cold to this girl. She asked Toishi if he didn't want to know more about her, like her real name or the fact that she was actually a princess. She felt like all she did was burden him with her problems, lie to him, and get him into trouble. Toishi expressed his desire to learn more about her. He also wanted to know everything about someone he cared for deeply. Marl revealed that her real name was Maliere Vran Miscronia, and she was the first princess of the kingdom of Miscronia, the second in line to the throne. She was supposed to marry a prince from the neighboring kingdom of Jebris, but she decided to escape through a secret passage in the royal treasury. As she was fleeing, she accidentally broke the oracle orb, which allowed one to see their future. This item had been gifted to humans by God himself and was also known as the genuine artifact, the Oracle Orb. However, even though it was a magical item, no one knew how to use the Oracle Orb. All this time, it had lain forgotten in the treasury, and it was unlikely anyone would have thought that to use this orb, it needed to be broken. Toishi asked with interest what happened next. Marl replied that she heard a voice echoing inside her head. Toishi thought of the voice of God and asked the girl what the voice had told her. The princess answered that the voice had informed her that in the kingdom of Calendale at the crossroads there would be an adventurers' guild where a black-haired man named Toishi would appear, and that she would need to tempt him. Of course, she couldn't trust the voice at first, but she had no choice. Besides, the voice had often helped her out, and that's how she finally managed to reach the crossroads. Then she fell in love with Toishi-san at first sight. The young couple then threw themselves onto the bed. Toishi told the girl that she was a true demoness, though that was putting it mildly. Marl replied that if he kept praising her like that, she would become even hotter. As he started whimpering in front of her, she thought that in this state, he would be completely obedient to her, and indeed, he was so cute right now. Their passion reached its peak. Toishi woke up in the morning when it was already light out. He felt a slight annoyance, thinking he had blurted everything out to Marl for nothing, but now he felt like he was back in shape. However, there was something he needed to check. He called out to the divine voice, which told the young man it thought Toishi had forgotten about it. The hero directly asked the voice if it was true that it had told Marl to meet him and fall in love with him. The voice replied that it turned out to be her preference. The voice also reminded the young man that he himself had done well with such a beautiful woman. Toishi disconnected and thought that this voice was truly awful, and knowing that some suspicious individual had brought him and Marl together was unbearable. That suspicious individual wondered, perplexed, why Toishi had strangely disconnected. However, there was nothing to be done about him, but watching him was interesting, and it would be good if he came here sooner. It was a magnificent day, sunny and warm. The Knights of the Crossroads had many important tasks. During breakfast, Marl asked Toishi what he planned to do today. The young man replied that they had no choice but to go where they intended, and with guards accompanying them, even if they tried to escape, it would be useless. They quickly got ready and headed for the exit, despite Hoipinya's pleas for them to rest a little longer. Toishi informed her that he and Marl were heading to the imperial capital. They thanked Hoipinya for sheltering them, and the hostess wished them a safe journey. Carriages moved along the road winding at the foot of the mountains. Inside one of them were Marl and Toishi, accompanied by Captain Waltz and his squad of royal knights. The young man remembered what Marl had told him about her guilt in what happened, but he still believed he was the only one who had killed those 12 people, and there was no changing that now. He would never forget this sin. Could Marl ever forgive him? Maybe he could somehow atone for his guilt towards Fioramo, but even if he did, it would look like he just wanted to be forgiven, and even if he wanted to atone for his sin, she might not want that. Meanwhile, Marl turned to Toishi, who flinched in surprise. The girl asked him not to frown, saying his face looked very scary. Not all people in the kingdom of Calendale were bad, but as expected, there might have been some unrest within the royal army due to a major crime, and because of this ongoing issue, a strong tension was palpable within. Marl handed Toishi an envelope and said that Commander Twining had sent this letter, which detailed the progress of the investigation into the events that occurred in those ruins, where a squad led by Captain Waltz had been dispatched. After the report of the trolls' killing was sent, the army's superior commanders issued an order to place a tracking seal on an item that was to be awarded as a Medal of Valor, which was very suspicious. But according to the status check, Toishi was confirmed to be a hero. At that moment, the superior commanders ordered them not to approach the hero for now and to await further instructions. This was indeed very strange, so an investigation immediately began and revealed that an illegal squad called the Cleaners was targeting the hero. He urgently tried to take protective measures, but it immediately became known that they were escapees from the crossroads, and using the seal, the first squad was sent for backup. Toishi realized that when the squad tasked with killing the hero received the report about the troll's elimination, they most likely started planning his assassination then. However, judging this solely by the letter was too naive. If a conclusion were to be drawn, it would mean that the army itself made this decision. If the troll's elimination was reported on the 1st, then the attack on them was already on the 6th. On the first day, they had a party, ate and drank, and then fell asleep. Most likely, the report on the troll's elimination was made that day. On the second day, Toishi spent the entire day on a date, and if Twining hadn't started preparing the hunting knife that day, he definitely wouldn't have made it. On the third day, they went to the nightly order where they checked his status and concluded that he was a hero. That day, they prepared equipment for the journey. On the fourth day, they left the crossroads early in the morning, and 3 days later, they finally arrived at the ruins. On the sixth day, before even half the day had passed, they were attacked. But still, it all happened too quickly. Their actions were excessively fast. In any case, they needed to connect all this information together. As Marl said, if they didn't connect all the information beforehand, they might be able to understand when the enemy would strike next. For starters, it would be good to complete this journey without any incidents. Suddenly, the carriage stopped and they were informed that they intended to take a break at this spot, but it was still far from the royal capital. A halt was announced, and Toishi finally had a free moment. He hadn't checked his status and abilities in a long time, and since he was unlikely to know when they would be attacked next or how much poison they would use, the best solution would be to level up his poison resistance, as well as his sense of presence and danger, to the maximum 3rd level. After completing this action, Toishi decided to try out his sense of presence first. Being in the center, he could feel how strong everyone was and how many people were there. Finally, he could use this amazing ability. If a person's name and appearance matched, he could essentially figure out who the presence belonged to, which was a very convenient ability. And if he managed to acquire the stealth ability, he would be able to avoid those who used presence detection and danger sense. Toishi also wanted to increase his production abilities. A great idea came to him. If the kingdom apologized, he would ask them for a mansion to use as his private workshop. The capital of Ulfen had about 170,000 people, but if you included adventurers and wandering merchants living in the slums, the kingdom's capital would reach 200,000 residents. The capital was surrounded by 4 fortress walls. Their carriage was currently at the edge of the 4th wall, which was still under reconstruction. This area was lined with many different shops and inns, causing constant commotion, and you could even find a slave market here. Deeper inside was the commoner's quarter. Here, unlike the edge of the wall, you could find higher quality shops, inns, and various artisan workshops. Inside the 3rd wall, even more first-class shops and inns lined the streets. Among them, you could find various government institutions, churches, and even a magic school, luxurious shops and homes, soldiers serving the castle, and knights. Inside the 2nd wall were the noble quarters, where people in expensive clothes strolled with guards protecting their peace. Adventurers likely had no particular business in this area, so you wouldn't find them there. This was Toishi's first time seeing the capital. The royal castle was enormous and majestic, towering over all other buildings. Captain Waltz bid farewell to the young people, stating that their escort ended there and advised them to be careful. Waltz shook the young man's hand and asked him to take care of Lady Marl. After saying these words, Captain Waltz and the first squad left them. This man had been friendly with them until the very end, seemingly showing his concern for them. At the palace, they were greeted by a young woman who assured them she would fulfill any wish they might have. The young people were struck by the beauty and splendor of the palace's interior. Toishi decided that going to an audience armed was not ideal, but turning to Marl, he told her not to worry about her mithril short sword. The young woman agreed with him because the red cloth tied to her sword only signified her attachment to her partner, and therefore, carrying it in front of the royal family would not be considered rude. Toishi called over a maid and asked her to store his weapon. The reception room door opened, and the young people were invited to proceed to the audience. Toishi tried to calm Marl down, but she reminded him that she was, in fact, a princess. She was Princess Malier Vran Miscronia of the Miscronia Kingdom. Toishi apologized and took a step forward. They entered the room where their audience was scheduled to take place. Toishi and Marl were ready to be received in the palace's throne room. The young people approached the throne where the ruler of the Kalendel Kingdom, Karandel the 41st, was seated. The emperor told the young people to rise, and Toishi respectfully introduced himself. The ruler also wished to hear the name of his companion. Marl stated that she was Lord Toishi's guide and reminded Karandel that they had met 3 years ago. She also expressed gratitude for the renewed invitation. The emperor furrowed his brow in concern and looked closely at Marl. Even the emperor couldn't oppose another royal family this time, as she was the 2nd princess of the kingdom. Karandel ordered everyone to leave the hall except Zontak. The emperor recognized the girl. It was Malier Vran Miscronia. Marl declared that they had a proposal. She asked the emperor to pretend that nothing had happened. Lord Toishi came to the palace to be recognized as an adventurer, and there was no other reason for their visit, nor had there ever been. In other words, the attack by assassins on Toishi needed to be concealed, as did the attack on the first princess of Miscronia. Thanks to the adventurers, they didn't have a single scratch. The ruler inquired what they hoped to achieve by this. Marl explained that first, such a mistake must not be repeated. Everything needed to be done thoroughly, and they also wanted to keep it all a secret. Carindel agreed, but expressed doubts about their whereabouts. Marl told the emperor that if they had to return to their country, she would be obligated to reveal every single detail. If it became public that princesses from another kingdom had been attacked, it could spark a war. Marl requested that no one learn about the planned attack and that Miss Gronia not learn of her presence. These were her two conditions. It was necessary to prevent disagreements between neighboring countries. For the Calendel kingdom, this was not such a difficult request. The emperor nodded and agreed to do everything as she asked. Marl thanked the emperor and stated that she had one more request regarding Lord Toishi. Toishi decided to voice his request himself as it would benefit them, so he needed to gain favor. The hero turned to Calendale and asked to use Alphen as a base of operations. After all, Alphen's capital is a highly developed city where the locals always greet you with a smile. For him, working in such a wonderful place would be simply amazing. While the emperor pondered, Toishi thought that although it might be dangerous here due to the many attacks, it was also the perfect place to earn the king's favor. Toishi added that as an adventurer, he willingly wanted to serve here. Money and fame attracted him, but he had no desire to misuse power. He wanted to become a hero for the kingdom of Calendale, ready to defend the country from attacks and dedicate all his strength for its good. The emperor stated that he understood everything and ordered Zontak to handle all matters, while the young man promised that if things became too difficult, he would simply leave the country. Zontak von Meister announced that he was part of His Majesty's inner circle and was someone worth remembering. The young people also introduced themselves and expressed their pleasure at the acquaintance. Zontak suggested they speak frankly and told them not to worry about their manner of speech, as he himself was tired of maintaining a formal tone. He informed them that through the Scout Guild they had learned about the hero's situation, but before they could do anything, everything changed and the nobles close to the army fled. Zontak admitted that they had acted unforgivably towards the heroes and Princess Melior. He himself was infinitely grateful to the heroes. If Princess Melior, the most precious asset of their country, had been secretly killed, it would have been simply terrible. It was quite unexpected that, despite his status, Zontak bowed his head before the young people. He got straight to the point, saying that for their country, ever since the heroes appeared, it was necessary for information about them to be shared with the countries in the League. This had always been publicly announced, but not all heroes liked it. What did they think about publicizing their deeds? Toishi firmly stated that he didn't really want anyone talking about him at all. Marl also agreed with Toishi, and then Zontak suggested they take a different approach. He asked the hero what they expected afterward, what exactly they wanted. Toishi replied that he wanted a normal-sized bath for himself, as well as a workspace that could be used for forging weapons and alchemy. Marl expressed a desire for a large bed and a comfortable sofa, and since she would likely have many guests after all her adventures, she would also like a reliable butler and maid. Zontak promised that he would try to fulfill all their wishes, though he admitted there might be some difficulties. He suggested the young people stay in the castle for a while, as he would like to have time for gardening, and in the meantime, he intended to weaken the influence of nobles who held strict policies in the army. They agreed to stay in the castle and looked with interest at the city from the height of the towers. It was decided that Toishi and Marl would remain in the capital of Ulfen. Marl looked Toishi in the eyes with a mysterious smile and said there was something she wanted. Toishi and Marl had been at the palace for 10 days, and they were just idling around. Marl thought that if things continued this way, they would be held hostage here for life. Just then, a maid approached them. She reported that the preparations for their base were complete. The young people went to see their new home. Marl was thrilled, exclaiming that their new base looked like a real mansion, with access to the main road and a peaceful, green spot, while Toishi noted that the house was larger than he had imagined. It would be difficult to clean such a large house, but Marl reassured him, saying that Zontak would assign a manager or maids to handle it. They went inside and were greeted by Jack Mason, who informed them that His Excellency Zontak had entrusted him with the management of the house. The young people, in turn, introduced themselves by name, and the manager offered to show them the estate. They all proceeded to the large hall and then went to the kitchen, before seeing the dining room. In the back of the house was the living room, as well as a smithy and an alchemy workshop. Toishi was very happy that, in addition to the smithy with a bath, there was a fireplace with a toilet, and they were all magically lit, though it clearly cost a fortune. Toishi admitted to Jack that he was impressed, finding it truly cozy, and the manager replied that such compliments to the staff were unnecessary. The hero thought that such a courteous older man like Jack must not be used to being addressed informally, and since he received his salary from the kingdom of Kalendale, it wasn't as if he had hired him. Toishi pulled out a hefty pouch of gold coins and handed it to Jack, explaining that the estate had just begun to be used and many things needed to be purchased, and money was needed for daily expenses. He could use it for food and other costs. Toishi didn't want to be indebted to the kingdom of Kalendale, as he knew that money for the upkeep of the house also came from them. Marl curiously asked Mr. Jack where the maid was, and the manager replied that his niece worked there as a maid, but she was currently out shopping. Toishi had completely forgotten about this charm of most estates. It seemed Mr. Jack's niece was just as courteous as he was. Just then, Mabel returned and apologized to her uncle for being late. Then she apologized for any inconvenience and introduced herself by name. Marl asked her to take care of them. The maid assured Toishi and Marl that she would be happy to work with them, getting so excited that she dropped the groceries on the floor. Then Mabel, citing urgent work and apologizing, excused herself. Jack apologized to the young people for his niece and explained her behavior as being due to her somewhat peculiar personality. Marl liked the girl and thought Mabel was kind and friendly. Mabel turned to Jack and told him that if he was going to make the first move, he should consult her, as she shouldn't have to explain to him how to properly behave with a woman. The manager clarified that she was talking about preferring heroes. Then Mabel asked Toishi what he would like for dinner, adding that if he had any preferences, she would gladly fulfill them. The young man replied that he actually did have something in mind, but he would prefer Marl to choose the menu, and the girl said it was hard for her to decide because they had eaten so much luxurious royal palace food lately. Therefore, she now wanted simple fish and rice, and the maid happily replied that it would all be done. Toishi raised his hand, palm facing the girl's, and his eyes widened. He asked Mabel if there was rice here, and the girl replied that if one searched a bit in the markets of Alphen, it could be found, to which Toishi exclaimed that he was terribly hungry. He just wanted rice. A terrible appetite overcame the hero, and after eating one serving, he immediately asked for more. Toishi couldn't believe that after arriving in this world about a month ago, he was only now discovering that rice existed here. He had longed for it so much that he couldn't get enough. Marl suspiciously asked the young man if he really loved rice that much. Toishi, in turn, asked if it was a traditional product of the Miskoronia kingdom. He definitely needed to visit that kingdom since they had rice, and it turned out he still knew nothing about this world. Mabel asked if that meant it was the taste of his hometown. The hero confirmed this guess and continued to devour the rice with gusto, and the princess did the same. Because of this, even his relationship with Marl improved. The bath in the new mansion was absolutely luxurious. Marl couldn't believe she would now be able to bathe in such a spacious tub. It all felt like a dream. The young people thoroughly enjoyed themselves in the pool, feeling like they were in paradise, and Toishi grew to like this world more and more. Marl asked the young man what his hometown was like. Toishi could have told her, but if he revealed the technologies from his world, it might affect this world and its future, so he replied that his city was a very peaceful place with no demons or wars. However, it was difficult to live and earn money there. In the place he lived, a person could only satisfy all their needs if they had money. Marl remarked that it all sounded like a place from a dream. Toishi smirked and stated that it was a country where about 30,000 people committed suicide each year due to hardship, where people lived like cogs in a far-from-ideal societal machine. No, it wasn't that great there. Marl inquired about their plans for tomorrow, and Toishi replied that they would first need to visit the Adventurers Guild in Alphen. His weapon was still usable, but he wanted to buy new armor. The princess asked why he was in such a hurry. Then the young man suggested they go to the market in the new city where they might find some good deals. Marl thought this was an excellent idea and expressed a desire to go to a restaurant that served rice and casually asked the hero if he was interested in sex. Toishi was neither against rice nor against sex. The girl got out of the pool, thinking that she had won this round. Toishi asked Marl where she had learned such an art of seduction, and the girl confessed that she had simply asked the maid about it. The maid from the royal castle had shown her everything practically. Toishi was simply amazed by Marl's level of curiosity and realized that this night would never end. The next day, Toishi went with Marl to the library as they couldn't find a better place to search for information. He still didn't know much about Iliad, so the library was an excellent solution. The library indeed had many books. It was a true treasure trove. All these books were handwritten. There probably weren't any printing presses in this world yet. Toishi asked the princess to give him a brief overview, and the girl agreed. She said that originally there were several civilizations in Iliad. But now it's December 3rd, 2203. 2,203 years have passed since the gods created this world. In this world, religion unites all sectors of people and guides them forward. Sometimes, gods descend to earth and perform miracles, bestowing magical items upon people. Toishi asked if the person who granted Marl the treasures was also a god. The girl, realizing he was referring to the pearl, answered in the affirmative. According to the books, the pearl was bestowed by a savior, specifically the goddess who created this world 2,203 years ago, and she entrusted it to Marl. The hero inquired what happened to this goddess, and the girl replied that she fell into an eternal sleep, leaving her body to the world to grant a new heir. Toishi was learning more and more. This meant the goddess who spoke with him and Marl was one of the oldest. But why was he summoned to another world? What had happened? Toishi decided he needed to think more clearly. This wasn't good. He just wanted to live peacefully in another world. Marl asked the hero if he was all right and if he was tired of listening to her. Hearing that the young man was willing to continue listening, she suggested they read about the continent. Marl informed him that it was cold in the south and warm in the north. The continent where the kingdom of Calendale and her hometown, Cronia, were located was called the Pit Continent, which means the first continent. Then the princess showed Toishi a political map of Pit. The kingdom of Calendale, where they currently were, was marked on it. It was one of the oldest states, situated on a plain. It produced enough goods for trade, with agriculture as its main industry. The standard of living was good, but they had to import salt because the sea was far away and there was no rock salt. Furthermore, due to the large number of forests controlled by mammal, the timber industry was underdeveloped. Marl then pointed to the kingdom of Misgronia, her home kingdom, which stretched across the eastern and southeastern parts of the continent. Because of the many lakes, rivers, and seas, it had abundant water resources and seafood. It was known as the land of travelers because it connected many ports of the world. It was said that all goods gathered in Cronia. However, despite having plenty of water, it had both pros and cons. She reiterated that Cronia supplied sea salt to Calendale. She wondered if Misgronia could surpass Calendale in terms of performance. Jeffels was located in the east of Pit and was a mountainous kingdom, with elf villages situated near the forests. Marl sighed and said that's pretty much how things were on the continent right now, but what did Toishi like the most? The young man thought for a moment and replied that he liked the kingdom of Misgronia the most. It was clear that Marl was very pleased to hear this. Toishi assured the princess that he was being honest and fair about it. Marl asked him suspiciously if he said that just because he could eat unlimited rice there. She expressed hope that someday they would be able to stroll through Misgronia. Toishi asked the girl if she wouldn't have to get married then, to which Marl replied that wouldn't happen because she wasn't going back to her homeland. Marl suggested that Toishi take a short walk through the market. It was unusually lively there, with merchants offering meat, flour, and many other goods, including salt freshly brought from Misgronia. Marl spent a long time haggling and bargaining at the stalls. They left the market very pleased, having bought many goods, including clothes for Marl. Toishi noted that the new district seemed to have everything one could wish for, and he also suggested they go to the market outside the castle. It was believed that the selection of goods was even greater there, and the young people spotted a shop that piqued their interest. However, it turned out not to be a shop but a brothel. Marl, realizing this, suggested Toishi leave immediately because there was no reason for him to look at it. The girl indignantly asked him if he really liked such vulgar girls, to which the young man replied that he was just curious about what they were selling there. Prostitution and slave trade were natural components of this world. Just then, a merchant called out to Toishi, saying that his slaves were healthy, obedient, and even possessed combat skills. The young man looked at one of the slaves and realized with surprise that this person could be bought and sold like an object. He looked with pity at the girls, who were still very young but were already slaves. Toishi felt an incredible pang of pity. When he first arrived in this world, he saw people who looked like slaves, never once lifting their gaze. Suddenly, Toishi saw a girl being dragged by two huge men. She struggled, promising to kill them if they even dared to try and sell her. The girl was thrown to the ground and froze, limp and unresponsive, leaving the young men unable to comprehend what had just happened. It seemed to be some kind of magic, capable of immobilizing a slave. The slave trader picked up the slave girl with one hand and declared that they would lower the price, stating that as long as the merchandise was theirs, they could do whatever they wanted. After that, the group of men left, taking the slave with them. Toishi hadn't learned everything about this world yet, but he felt like he understood its laws, though slaves here were treated like mere objects. This was the grim reality of his new world. Marl, seeing Toishi's changed expression, suggested they leave if he felt so unwell. Toishi thought that it was no surprise such things happened in this world, but he would have to come to terms with it if he chose to live here. Even if such things occurred, everyone accepted them as normal. The young man asked Marl if their work didn't surprise her. Marl looked at the hero with confusion and said that she could only guess what his world was like. She didn't care about any of it, they were just slaves. Adventurers who fell into debt, merchants' daughters sold off, children from disadvantaged families, and even criminals among them. Nothing could be done once someone became a slave, so she no longer wanted to think about it. She hugged Toishi, sensing his inner turmoil. Marl suggested they head home, and the hero agreed. On the way, Marl suddenly stopped and looked to the side. There was a strange girl there. She sat against a wall, chained, with a sign around her neck indicating she was for sale. Her face reminded Toishi of someone. It was the figure of the assassin Furamo forces. Toishi and Marl couldn't take their eyes off this girl among the other slaves. The slave trader, noticing Toishi's gaze, said he had excellent taste, as this girl had just been delivered to him. He explained that she was a mid-level adventurer and skilled in martial arts, and if he used subjugation magic, he would achieve her unconditional obedience. If he hadn't heard of subjugation magic, the trader offered to explain it all. He elaborated that through this magic, slaves form a bond with their master and obey any of their commands, which is the essence of subjugation magic. If they disobey, it's considered a breach of contract and the slave will experience terrible pain. In the worst case, they could even die. Toishi realized he had seen this very magic at the market and asked the trader how much the girl cost. The trader informed him that she was worth no less than 20 gold coins. Toishi asked the trader to wait and took the contract to look it over. Marl, unable to hide her surprise, asked Toishi why he chose this particular girl, but even if the hero had asked himself, he wouldn't have found an answer. Toishi only wondered if he could protect this girl if he bought her. After dripping blood onto the contract, the deal was finalized. The trader, accepting the money, stated that according to the contract he had read, owners also had a set of responsibilities. He must provide the slave with food, shelter, and clothing, and if he no longer needed the slave, he must bring them to the market, and the trader would buy them back. Then the trader pushed Furamu towards Toishi and said that this man was now her new master. The girl recognized him, and the hero offered for her to come with him. He extended his hand to help her up, but she remembered how those hands had choked her. Furamo asked the hero, "Why me?" She would have killed him without hesitation if she had the chance. She lunged at her new master, and Toishi was forced to use magic. Furamu dropped her hands powerlessly, saying she had been defeated and brought here, and now he was her master. Toishi pulled a warm blanket from his storage and draped it over the girl. This simple act greatly surprised Furamu. Toishi saw that the girl had come to her senses and again offered her to come with him, though he knew that no matter what he said now, Furamu wouldn't listen. Just then, the merchant approached the girl and said he had forgotten something. After all, everyone knows that slaves obey any command, especially if it's a former criminal. Even if the master asks for intimacy, the slave must agree. Furamu meekly replied that she would do everything in her power. Mabel was surprised that the young men hadn't returned alone. She was even more surprised when she learned that this was a slave from the market. Toishi explained to the maid that Furamu was their guest. Mabel replied that she would then prepare a bedroom and food for her, and she should take a bath while she got everything ready and returned. Toishi sadly thought that he wouldn't be able to help her because it would look very indecent. He was worried that the girl would be alone. Toishi wondered how Furamo was still alive after so many burns, bruises, and cuts. Suddenly, the girl knelt down and grabbed Toishi's clothes. The young man reminded her that she was not a slave here, but a guest. Marl came to Furamo's aid and asked her to just relax. Marl emphatically stated that she would go to the bath with her, and the boys were forbidden to enter. Toishi, left alone, thought that the magic of subjugation was unlikely to harm this girl. And at that moment, Mabel announced that the room and food for the guest were ready. If there's anything else she can help him with, he just needs to say so. Toishi simply apologized to the maid. Meanwhile, the girls were bathing, and Marl once again soaped up Furamu. Furamu confessed that she didn't understand what Toishi was thinking. As she soaped the girls back, Marl replied that she didn't know either. There's still a lot she doesn't know about Toishi-san. His words always change her perspective and her worldview in general. Furamu admitted that she used to be an assassin, but things are different now. Marl said that it seemed to her that Toishi was far removed from murder and cruelty, as was his world, but Furamu angrily exclaimed that such a world doesn't exist. She wouldn't be able to live in such a world, because even children who can't fight back have to do something for their country. And what would Marl want to do for herself? The girl replied that Toishi-san also does everything he can for her, and had anyone ever loved her. This cruel world had simply corrupted her. If something was bothering her, she could confidently tell her. Furamu enviously asked if this was really her home. Marl replied that this house indeed belonged to her, and confessed that she loved Furamu-san. Everything was clear to the slave and former assassin. Marl asked Toishi why he didn't stop worrying about everything related to assassins. The young man admitted that he felt like he was starting to lose his guilt, but he couldn't just do that. Because of him, Furamu had gone mad and become unhappy. Marl blushed and said that despite his strength, he was still human, and he couldn't make everyone happy. Furamu, meanwhile, thought that this man was trying to help her. 3 days passed, and Mabel still couldn't reach the top shelf to grab a box. Furamu easily retrieved it and handed it to the maid. Mabel stared at the girl in surprise, saying that she was their new guest, but Furamu replied that she was a slave. Without listening further, the maid apologized and said she had to go. Furamu realized it was hard to be both a slave and a guest at the same time. She wasn't sure if she could stay there any longer and live with them, as she had been searching for a home for a long time. She was the third child in a family of knights. Furamu wanted to become as great a knight as her father, but he always told her that a girl couldn't be a knight. He urged her to behave properly, taking after her sisters, but Furamu always felt out of place. She just wanted to find her own path and become a knight so her father would be proud of her. One day, her efforts paid off and she was given a task. She already knew the rules of combat and with great difficulty joined the royal army, fulfilling irregular military call-ups. But she found comrades there in her place, or at least she thought so until a certain day. All her comrades died except for her. A trial was held in her home country and her father was exiled and disgraced. All her dreams vanished into thin air. Marl hummed vaguely and looked at Toishi, telling him not to interfere in the affairs of assassins. After all, he had been seriously hurt because of them. At that moment, Furamu entered the room, and everything seemed clear to her. She stated that she was sorry for how everything turned out. Marl said that Toishi just wanted to be a hero. Marl hugged the girl and said that Furamu was also a victim. She acted out of duty, and in the end, they both wounded each other. Marl decisively rose from the table. She suggested they follow her idea. If no one else could forgive them, then she would. Toishi couldn't understand what she intended to do, but Marl declared that she was a princess. Toishi asked Marl what she could say about Furamu, wondering what Furamu had done that was unforgivable. Furamu stated that while Marl's words might seem nonsensical, they were actually a very reasonable approach. When she joined the unit, she was prepared for anything. They were only taught to fight. She lost and handed over all the knowledge she possessed, and then she was severely wounded on a mission. Toishi helped her in her time of need when she was sold into slavery, but would he forgive her sins, especially since she disliked being a slave due to how people treated her? This was the reason her life was so corrupt. What would her comrades think if they saw her like this? Even though she couldn't be forgiven for the death of her comrade, despite them having killed others, they were still friends. In reality, she couldn't forgive herself, which was why she had driven herself so deep into this problem. Furamu asked Marl if she could stop being a slave, but the girl replied that, unfortunately, it was impossible, as this was a punishment for criminals. Furamu couldn't understand why this strange guy was helping a slave and a former enemy. Maybe it was because in this world, murder is considered an absolutely terrible thing. Toishi turned to the slave and asked her if they had done something wrong and how they could help her. Then he looked at the girl and apologized for ruining her life and her future. The hero swore that he would atone for his sin. He offered Furamu to live with them. The slave was extremely surprised by such an offer. The next day, Toishi realized with annoyance that he was already late. He had spent so long pondering everything that he ended up not getting enough sleep. When he saw Furamu in new clothes, he was shocked by her appearance. Marl and Mabel had transformed her into a true lady. Marl explained that Furamu thought she was a slave, not a guest, so they decided that from that day on, she would be a maid. Jack added that Mabel wasn't quite managing with the large amount of work, and he thought it was a good idea. Furamu thanked everyone for understanding her and offered her services going forward. She dreamed of being loved as well. Hearing these words, Toshi became wary. What was she saying? Furamu immediately declared that she was just joking, but the young man thought it sounded very convincing coming from her. It was very strange to realize that this girl had joined their company, as she was, after all, a former killer. At the market, some guy called out to Toshi. It was a messenger from Calendale Castle who had a special errand for the hero. Before Toshi could figure out what was going on, he was tied up by the castle staff and dragged away. At the castle, the maid informed her mistress that her order had been carried out and everything was ready. She entered the hall where a bound Toshi lay on the floor and, addressing him, offered him to become her boyfriend. Lying on the floor in an uncomfortable position, the hero couldn't understand what was happening here. The princess stepped towards Toshi and confidently declared that he would belong to her, considering it a great honor for him. The hero thought this was just another one of Princess Calanella's jokes, as she was the ruler of the Calendale Kingdom. Toshi told her that it wasn't right, and if she didn't have any business with him, he intended to leave immediately, as a man shouldn't be in an unmarried woman's room. The princess raised her eyebrows and offered the hero at least a cup of tea, suggesting they chat a bit, and although she implied a friendly meeting, it felt quite different. Toshi couldn't understand what Princess Calanella was planning. He asked why he should belong to her, and the princess replied that Toshi was the bravest man in the last 50 years, and together they could make the kingdom the most prosperous in the world. Then the princess added that it had always been this way, and the young man asked her to be more precise. Did she really want them to become intimate right after meeting, especially since their introduction hadn't happened under the best circumstances? To this, the girl replied that she knew a lot about Toshi. She had seen the young man when her father spoke with him. Moreover, he had lived in this castle for 10 days. Toshi couldn't understand why he had never seen the princess there before. Toshi responded that he wasn't interested in any of it. He had helped her father for money and honor, but power didn't interest him. Besides, he already had Marl. Just then, a maid entered the room bringing tea. The princess invited the hero to partake, noting that only certain aristocrats and members of the royal family could afford this tea. Toshi took a sip and confirmed that the tea's aroma was indeed unique. He wondered which kingdom this tea was from. In reality, it was a high-grade royal sleeping potion. The young man slowly poured the contents of the cup onto the floor and asked the girl why she wanted him. His unique skill helped him determine that this sleeping potion had the properties to put anyone to sleep. Apparently, the princess intended to use Toshi, but she didn't know everything about him, and it wasn't his bravery that interested her. The maid apologized to the hero, saying she had simply mixed up the herbs. For Toshi, this was not surprising. The princess treated her own laws as she pleased and sent people to their deaths. Of course, it was upsetting, as evil should not be happening in the kingdom. However, this incident did not affect the princess's expression at all. She was simply amused, and after this, she wanted the hero to be hers even more. She then addressed the maid, Stella. Princess Nenora told her to activate the pendant. Toshi immediately realized it was a magical artifact. Nenora hugged the maid and praised her. Then the princess turned to the hero and asked what it felt like to experience ancient magic, and the young man understood it was a hypnotic pendant and his body was completely immobilized. Nenora reproachfully said that if he had agreed to be hers right away, this wouldn't have happened, but now nothing could be done. She looked into the hero's eyes and offered him her friendship. The princess, with a brazen smirk, remarked that she would do anything to get what she wanted. After that, she drank some liquid from a vial that Stella handed her and leaned over the motionless Toshi. The hero asked the princess what she had drunk, and the girl replied that it wasn't poison but an aphrodisiac, a potion that would prevent even a virgin from feeling pain. Toshi thought with annoyance that even his poison-resistant skill was useless here. Nenora, apparently already feeling the effects of the drink, began to unbuckle the hero's belts. The princess's body was already burning with desire, and she was quite insistent about sex. Both girls, with curiosity and passion, performed certain actions on him. They were slightly surprised by his physical condition. Stella asked her mistress not to show weakness. However, Nenora ordered Stella to go first. The maid did not resist the princess's command. Toshi still couldn't control his body, and if he did nothing, not only the princess but also the maid would bother him. The maid began to pull down the hero's pants, but with some incredible effort, he forced himself free and fled. Nenora was so disappointed that she trembled with anger. How could this man run away halfway through? Wouldn't he regret it later as a man? Toishi thought about how he wanted to give his virginity to Marl, and he told the princess this, calling her foolish. At that moment, the door to the room suddenly burst open, and everyone saw Marl, who asked the young man if he was all right. She had learned everything from the messenger. Nenora recognized the girl as Princess Malier Miscrinia. She wondered why Marl always got the best of everything and declared she wouldn't let Marl get close to the hero. Marl retorted that she only ever wanted people and did whatever she pleased, which was why the people called her selfish. Nenora demanded that Marl stop accusing her, especially since Marl had refused an alliance with the kingdom, and ever since she received a letter from her sister, she had been offended by her. But Marl replied that she couldn't hear her and didn't want to, and she knew nothing of any sister Tinave. Toishi, frustrated, clutched his head. Was he really about to lose his virginity because of this? Were these princesses close acquaintances? Meanwhile, the situation escalated to physical violence, and the hero asked them if they were childhood friends. Marl looked at the hero in surprise and asked why he thought they had been friends since childhood. Toishi breathed a sigh of relief, realizing they just got along well. At that moment, the king entered the room with his guards and asked what was happening. His Majesty couldn't understand what all the shouting was about in his palace. After understanding the situation, His Majesty apologized to the hero and took all the blame, admitting he hadn't been vigilant enough. Toishi reassured the emperor and asked him not to be so afraid. Still, the king had tried to kill him so many times and he wasn't even from this country. Carndle the 41st replied that it wasn't just about that, he simply wanted to apologize for what had happened. Then the king speculated that Toishi probably no longer wished to help their kingdom. The young man was astonished by such treachery, using such a convenient pretext to attempt his life so many times. At this point, Marl addressed His Majesty and said she needed to speak with him. Soon after, it was announced that Princess Nenora was placed under arrest for 2 months, as was the girl who accompanied her. Since Stella had poisoned Lord Toishi, she would face the death penalty. The hero found this decision unfair. It seemed the princess was to blame, but the maid would be executed, even though she had no choice but to follow her mistress's orders. However, Toishi was informed that the royal family does not make mistakes, and if a mistake occurs, it means the maid failed to protect the princess from it, which was her duty. Therefore, the maid would be executed and the princess would be arrested. Marl asked Toishi not to worry, to which the young man indignantly asked if that was normal. Marl calmed the hero down. Zontak added that the hero's worrying wouldn't cancel the death penalty or hide the evidence, but if he wanted, they could hand the girl over to him after she was enslaved. Marl thanked Zontak for his generosity. Toishi doubted that the princess and the maid would agree to such terms. Nenora believed that imprisoning her was too much, and turning to the hero, she accused him of not becoming her friend. If he had, everything would have been fine, but now Stella was going to be executed because of him. Zontak approached the princess and informed her that he would take her to the monastery. As a final remark, Nenora exclaimed to Marl that she wouldn't give up until she took everything from her. Marl addressed the king and suggested they conclude all discussions for the day, as she was tired and intended to return home with Toishi. Once they were outside, Marl remarked that she constantly had problems with that girl. But she was glad that Toishi belonged only to her, and the hero felt grateful to Marl. Mabel and Furumu were very happy to see their master's return. Furumu rushed to the young man and asked if he was hurt, saying that her heart almost stopped when she heard the news. She had been very worried and constantly on edge. Marl said that if anything happened, everyone in the mansion would be worried. The maids simultaneously told their master not to act recklessly. Since Toishi had the danger detection skill, he noticed the poisoned tea, but if it had been prepared for Marl or Furumu, he wouldn't have been able to remain calm either. Now they were all like family to him, and he sincerely apologized for making everyone worry. Toishi felt like he was home, and Furumu happily announced that she and Mabel had already prepared dinner. Toishi felt relieved as soon as they returned to the mansion. Even his fatigue disappeared. But when he came out of the bath, he saw Marl drinking something from a vial. Toishi anxiously rushed to the girl and asked what was in the vial. Marl smiled mysteriously and informed him that he probably wouldn't get any sleep tonight because her body was now ready to explode from within. Several days had passed since Furumu started working at the mansion. She woke up, determined to do her best that morning. Mabel said she would make breakfast and her uncle would set the table, leaving Furumu to change the bedsheets in the bedroom. She had a lot of work, but she was happy about it. The former slave entered the room and apologized to the master and mistress for intruding. She found the young couple in an intimate moment, with Marl asking Toishi if he liked maid outfits. The hero replied that it was a bit much, but Marl insisted his body said otherwise. Furamu, flustered, excused herself and closed the door behind her. Mabel turned to her and asked if she had changed the sheets. Furamu replied that the master would be in the bedroom for a while longer, so she would change them later. Mabel, surprised, asked what he intended to do in there so late, and the former slave replied that it was too soon for her to know such things. Mabel, feeling hurt, reminded the girl that she was the head maid, but Furamu insisted on doing other work. Mabel was so flustered that she dropped a bucket of water. A little later, the head maid found the master at the dining table, looking completely exhausted. Mabel inquired about the master's well-being and offered to prepare him something light if needed, but Toishi declined, explaining only that he was physically drained and just wanted to live peacefully. Mabel suggested that the master was tired because of Princess Calanella and expressed a desire to help him, while Furamu thought it best to simply leave him alone. At that moment, Jack entered the room and reminded Mabel that she had left the kettle on the fire unattended, scolding her for making too many mistakes lately. The girl explained that she was still an inexperienced maid and didn't know much, admitting she couldn't perform tasks like her uncle yet, but she also wished to have special skills. Jack then offered Toishi an onigiri. Mabel thought that Marl's joyful smile was comforting and Furamu's enormous chest was healing just to look at. If only she had some of those qualities, she could become better. The maid offered the hero a massage, wanting to help him get rid of his fatigue. Mabel began to massage the master's neck and shoulder area. However, her efforts and hard work did little to help Toishi. He turned to the head maid and asked if she could put a little more strength into the massage since she was a young woman and not a child. But Mabel, offended, stated that this was all she could do. Toishi then suggested that she walk on his back with her feet. This suggestion greatly surprised the maid as she couldn't have imagined it before. Toishi couldn't understand why Mabel was so surprised, explaining that in his homeland, this was a fairly popular massage and there was nothing strange about it. Inspired by her master's words, the young woman took off her shoes and did as he wished. This massage method proved to be more effective, and Toishi felt a sense of pleasure. Mabel enjoyed it no less than her master, as she could feel the young man's body temperature beneath her feet. The maid occasionally asked about Toishi's condition, thinking with excitement that she was walking on the back of the hero of this country. Toishi asked Mabel to step harder, and the young woman complied, experiencing a wonderful sensation. Just then, Marl entered the room and stared in surprise at the maid, who was energetically walking on Toishi's back. Finally, she realized it was a massage and thought with annoyance that she didn't possess healing magic. Otherwise, she would have helped the hero recover. Toishi replied that recovery magic was good, but he was doing pretty well without it too. Marl irritably called him a pervert, asking if he actually enjoyed having a girl step on him. The massage was finished, and Toishi thanked Mabel for her help. The head maid was very pleased with herself because she had been able to assist her master, and this realization made her face flush red. She turned to her master and said that if he ever needed a similar massage again, she would gladly provide it. Marl was furious at Mabel's words, and Toishi suddenly had a bad feeling. Unexpectedly, Marl pushed the young man onto his stomach and skillfully climbed onto his back. She also wanted to step on him, and Toishi responded that it was just a massage and he didn't have any fetish about it. Besides, Marl was heavy, but the girl didn't listen to Toishi and started dancing on the young man's back. Toishi begged Marl to stop, and then he quietly murmured that his fatigue had vanished completely. He had never felt so comfortable being stepped on before. Jack told Furam, who was standing by the door, that it wasn't a bad thing for Toishi and Marl to be together, but the girl didn't agree with that sentiment. She had committed a crime by attempting to take her master's life, and she didn't think he was the type to worry about such things. She actually found it quite amusing to watch her master and mistress. The old man shook his head and said he hoped his niece wouldn't suddenly develop strange inclinations. Cries for help echoed through the settlement, and a buzzing sound filled the air. Toishi wondered anxiously, what's going on here? Then he noticed the insects and unleashed a torrent of magical energy, aimed at destroying the hostile force. The swarm of insects seemed to hit an invisible wall, and the monsters fell to the ground. No one expected anything less from the hero. Marl declared that with such power, they would destroy the nest in the blink of an eye, and next time they would kill all of them. An interesting idea had come to Toishi and Marl the day before. They decided to earn some money at the guild and took a request from the residents of Viato village. Earlier that day in the early morning, Toishi heard the voice of God. It asked him not to ignore it and to listen, because it wanted to tell the young man something important. The voice informed him that a great flood would occur in 2 months and that he needed to tell the other people about it. Toishi asked Marl what exactly this great flood was. The girl replied that there was nothing strange about it, but Toishi wanted to hear everything about this flood. Marl explained that a great flood is a phenomenon where monsters overwhelm all areas, usually occurring every 2 decades. The scale of the damage depends on the location and time. During the last flood, a huge number of monsters moved into the capital of Ulfen, causing immense destruction. 20 years ago, she was still a child and the maids were in tears while the number of guards protecting the palace decreased. Many of them never returned home, but she only noticed all of this much later. The girl asked why Toishi was suddenly talking about this flood, and the hero replied that a mysterious voice of God had told him about it. Marl was surprised that he was an oracle, and Toishi stated that, regardless, it would be best for him to find out everything from the kingdom. He's going to the palace to announce that a great flood will occur in 2 months. However, it seemed few in the palace would believe him, even though he was a hero. Jack told Toishi that if rumors spread, he could be accused of causing unrest, and the hero replied that it would be very difficult to prove. If he told people he heard about the flood from God, everyone would think he was insane. Toishi asked the butler if he could get an audience with Zontak, and the butler replied that if they secured the Marquis's support, they could also seek help from the temple. Marl added that there were enough priests in the capital's temple who could hear the eye of God, and if Toishi spoke with them, Marquis Zontak wouldn't be indifferent. Jack promised he would report everything to the Marquis. With 2 months left until the Great Flood, they began hunting monsters and earning money. They needed good equipment to become stronger before the flood arrived. Meanwhile, Marl and Toishi finished clearing the village of insects using their magic. There were so many monsters that both of them were exhausted by the time they finished. Toishi was surprised by the amount of materials gathered from this mission and wanted to put everything into storage. It included high-quality sweet honey, hornet larvae pupae, and large hornet eggs, all of which could be sold for a good price. The young adventurers destroyed the large hornet's nest and decided to give their spoils to the villagers. The villagers were very grateful to the adventurers for their help. The residents were happy to realize that their village would now be safe, and these adventurers had completed the task very quickly. They should have submitted a request to the guild much sooner. Marl confessed to the hero that she initially thought of this request as just a way to earn money, but it never occurred to her that so many people could be made happy by these materials. Being an adventurer was truly great, and Toishi completely agreed with her. At the guild, they received a substantial reward for killing 341 hornets. It amounted to 95 gold coins, 9 silver coins, and 2 copper coins. The young adventurers were pleasantly surprised by their earnings from a single request. Being an adventurer was becoming profitable. On top of that, they also got honey, larvae, and pupae, which were considered expensive ingredients. Toishi's level rose to 20, and Marl's level increased to 11, making her an average adventurer. However, they wanted to become even stronger because they didn't know how many monsters there would be on the specific day of the flood. Toishi hugged Marl and told her she did a great job today. Both maids happily greeted the young masters at the mansion, and Marl informed Mabel that they had brought them high-quality ingredients. Afterward, Toishi pulled out a huge pupa from storage and handed it to a bewildered Mabel. The head maid was very scared, and the hero had to apologize to her for frightening her. Fioramo remained indifferent, as she had eaten monster meat in her time. She said that she and Mabel would prepare dinner together, to which the head maid immediately declared that she wouldn't eat it. However, Marl and Toishi had saved money by completing a guild request, and now they needed to buy good weapons. Meanwhile, Jack approached Zontak and relayed the hero Toishi's request. The Marquis promised that he would see what could be done. Marl turned to Toishi and asked if they would do a quest today. The young man replied that there was a workshop in the mansion, and he wanted to try making his own weapon before the flood, an idea the girl supported. She was a little surprised that the hero knew blacksmithing and alchemy, and Toishi thanked the girl for the food and replied that it was high time he learned it. He went to the workshop and happily looked over its contents. It had everything he needed. Marl peeked into the workshop to see the contents of the forge. Toishi suggested that the girl try alchemy, as the alchemy table was next to the forge. Marl eagerly agreed to do alchemy, while the young man worked in the forge. Then they would see what they had achieved, and Toishi thought that if Marl decided to do this, he should keep an eye on her. Besides, she would be a great help if she mastered alchemy. Toishi had already increased his rank and gained 19 skill points, and for 15 points, he would raise his skill to the 5th level and this time master blacksmithing, as he would need powerful weapons. And if he managed to release weapons to the market, he would be able to increase both his and Marl's strength. Moreover, creating weapons is a dream for any man. Toishi decided to start by designing a dagger, curious to see what he could create at level 1. He then lit a fire, already knowing how to forge metal and use tools thanks to his skills. The hero noted that the workshop's furnace was imbued with magical power. As the fire flared up the moment he applied magic. Next, he heated the metal over the fire and saw that it was coming along quite well. After that, he picked up a smithing hammer to shape the metal. Forging came easily to the young man because he had increased his rank, along with his strength and agility. The hotter the metal, the easier it was to work with. Once the blade was shaped, Toishi plunged the metal into water and then continued working on it until the blade was complete. Toishi sharpened the dagger on a whetstone and began crafting the hilt from leather and wood, noticing with surprise how quickly he finished. It only took him 1 hour to create a high-quality weapon from scratch. Toishi decided to level up his skill from that point on by making daggers. Creating a weapon at level 2 took a lot of time, but by raising his skills to level 3, he unlocked the ability to use magic, and at level 4 he learned how to increase magical power, making the weapon quality excellent, so the hero tried to create an item with magical power. Each time he leveled up, the time required to create a blade decreased, and his knowledge grew more and more. Toishi's head was splitting from the sheer amount of information, but he continued forging as if possessed, realizing he had already made dozens of types of weapons. He was surprised that Marl didn't even complain about the noise, even though she was in the neighboring workshop. Apparently, there was some kind of magical insulation here. Just then, Marl entered the forge and joyfully announced that she had finally obtained the magical medicine, then expressed surprise at the large quantity of finished weapons. Marl was with Furamu, who was also astonished by the quality and quantity of weapons Toishi had made. The hero saw the two of them examining a perfect quality dagger. At this level of blacksmithing, he had learned to forge sacred and magical swords, and the method for crafting from demonic materials had also changed, so now that he could defeat monsters, he could gather the necessary materials. Marl admiringly acknowledged that Toishi was indeed doing very well, and the young man allowed her to take the perfect quality dagger for herself. It was the best thing he had made that day, and the hero turned to Furamu and asked her if she wanted anything for self-defense. The girl noted that there were not only daggers but other items as well. However, she reminded the young people that slaves were not allowed to carry weapons, let alone criminal slaves, because they might turn the blade against their master, but she could handle anything with her bare hands. Marl pressed the gifted dagger to her chest and said that even if it were a gemstone crafted by the greatest master, this item looked better and was more pleasing to the eye. Toishi wondered if giving Marl a gift was the right thing to do, and if he had made the correct decision by offering Furamu the weapon. Meanwhile, Marl handed Toishi a vial of the recovery potion she had made and asked him to accept it as thanks for the dagger. The young man thanked her, and Marl exclaimed that it was all quite fun and being an adventurer was interesting, but alchemy had also piqued her interest, and now she intended to research the effects of the recovery potion. Marl only managed to raise her skill to the 1st level in 1 day. By then, it was dinner time, and the girls informed the hero that they were having fish today. Toishi had raised his skill to the 5th level today because he had been crafting weapons all day. Additionally, his smithing hammer had also leveled up, and the hero decided to continue creating powerful weapons to prepare for the flood. A few days later, Toishi, accompanied by Jack, went to Zontak's mansion, which was several times larger than their own home. The butler quietly knocked on the Marquis's study door, and he allowed them to enter. Jack then announced that he had brought the hero. Toishi stated the reason for his visit, and Zontak replied that he knew why he had come, and as it turned out, that was only a small part of it. Oracles in all temples had confirmed his words about the flood, and now all countries were exchanging available information. It was now definitively known that the Great Flood was coming. The scale of the flood varied depending on the location and time, and it seemed that last time it had caused immense damage to the capital of Alphen. Toishi was the only hero in the country. The young man smiled and said that, in that case, he had something. He activated his treasury and showed the Marquis a vast number of sabers and swords he had crafted. The young man declared that he had made a huge batch of weapons to increase their strength, with about 30 of them here. He suggested that the Kalendale troops should use them, as it wasn't too late to integrate these weapons into the army. Zontak understood that the sabers would be very useful for the cavalry, and he promised to deliver them. However, he asked if it was possible to produce them for the entire country, not just for the cavalry troops and adventurers. Toishi answered affirmatively and added that he had only made the blades, so it would be better to call another master to craft the handles. Making a spear or a blade wasn't that difficult, but the handles were quite a hassle. If the country needed mass production of magical weapons, he would need magical tools. The hero provided samples, and Zontak found them to be excellently crafted as well. He told the young man that it would be wonderful if he continued to cooperate with this country. Zontak felt that they might still be able to survive the flood, but Toishi replied that he wouldn't want to give all of this away for free. After all, he had used iron, mithril, orichalcum, crystals, and black steel to craft the weapons, and the production of these weapons required compensation. The hero expressed his hope that they would reach an agreement with Zontak. He could quickly craft the blades, so they needed to get the materials as soon as possible. Finally, the Marquis and the hero shook hands, and Zontak expressed his hope that the army and the adventurers would defeat the flood together. That evening before bed, Marl asked Toishi a question. She asked him to teach her magic, as Marl also wanted to be well prepared for the great flood. Mabel asked Marl what she was reading, and the girl replied that she was studying a spellbook. It was a rather ancient book, and the head maid asked Marl to show her the pages of this magic book, but Marl absolutely refused to do so. She recalled how she had approached Toishi, asking him to help her learn magic. After all, the great flood was coming, and she needed to be ready for it, so she wanted to learn magic no matter what. Wouldn't it be great if she could use magic? Toishi agreed with the girl and began her training. He suggested she buy a spellbook called Primitive Magic. Marl delighted Toishi with her curiosity and eagerness to learn magic and alchemy. He would feel much better if she helped him instead of fighting, and he firmly assured the girl that he would help her. Toishi told her to take his hands and interlace their fingers, directing magical power into him, first into one hand, then into the other, to spread it. Their fingers intertwined. The young man had large hands and the girl had small ones. The hero asked Marl to concentrate magical power in her left hand, and the girl felt the energy enter her. Toishi asked if she was in pain, but Marl replied that she was fine. Marl felt a fantastic surge of magical energy. Toishi also felt that Marl could transfer a huge amount of magical power. She also had an aptitude for magic. Toishi told Marl that she should now absorb the received magical power and concentrate the power in her left hand again. He would take power from her right hand, and the more magic he gave, the more he took, and now it was becoming difficult for him. Finally, the magic passed through the young people's bodies and merged, and Marl's magic slowly began to adapt to Toishi's body. He felt her magic warming him from the inside, which was an unusual sensation. It was as if he was floating in space, feeling Marl's warmth and love, and the girl felt the same way. Toishi decided that what he was experiencing was Marl's soul, as primitive magic is a type of magic that connects the hearts of two people. It was unusual and quite strange, floating like spirits in a silent space. Toishi anxiously called out to Marl, who lay with her eyes closed. It seemed Toishi had rushed and increased the amount of magical power, so now he had to use recovery magic, as Marl could have been harmed by his foolishness. However, after the magic circulated, he felt a surge of power, as if their mixed magical energy was already familiar to his body. Along with the magical power, Toishi felt Marl's soul. When he first used the magic, she must have felt his energy too. The girl whimsically called Toishi an incubus. The hero asked Marl how she was feeling, and she replied that it felt a bit strange, but she had understood something. Then Marl suggested they switch places and start a new session. Toishi realized that this strange, ticklish feeling was clearly different from the previous one. The hero immediately understood what it actually was. It seemed she was now taking his magical power. The princess told the young man to sit still. Toishi asked her to stop, as he had more magical power. The girl, meanwhile, lay on her back and sighed passionately. Primitive magic, which is used for exchanging magical power and circulating energy between people, is quite dangerous. But Toishi felt power overflowing him. He checked his status and found that Marl had drained about 100 units of his magical power, which was a significant loss, but the girl must have felt better. Their primitive magic skills were at the first level. If they were to level up in this state, it would instantly become a power that could be absorbed, but what if it were used for insidious purposes? Toishi turned to Marl and exclaimed that he was glad they were able to use magic. The princess flipped the page of the book and said that there was more to it and they could continue. They had a whole night ahead and primitive magic was good for nighttime fun, but Marl's insatiable appetite made Toishi regret it. Toishi woke up the next morning with a headache. Fromo, serving breakfast, wished Toishi a good morning and hoped he had a good night. The hero chose not to answer, muttering something vague in response. He felt awkward after the incident with the dagger when the girl refused his gift, calling herself a slave. This couldn't go on, so Toishi directly asked Fromo what she thought of him. The girl firmly replied that he was the country's hero and she was his slave. The young man expected such an answer and rephrased his question. He didn't consider her a slave. Although that might be her status, to him, she was an important person living in this mansion and he considered her a member of his family. Toishi confessed that he came from a place far more distant than she could imagine, and upon receiving the mansion, he found a place where he could finally relax. Therefore, he wanted this place to be the same for Fromo. Fromo replied that she woke up early to take care of him and Marl and Mabel were now chatting with Jack. These were peaceful days, unlike the days when she was a child. Toishi had given her all of this. He had given her the opportunity to feel human. But as a former assassin, didn't he despise her for it? The young man replied that he wouldn't hate someone for something like that. Fromo responded that she would prefer him to hate her. They were opponents, and of course, there were bad moments, but she couldn't hate Toishi either. He was the one who saved her from those bloody days when she was a mercenary. Now she was completely different. If everything had stayed the same, she would have simply lost heart, gradually going insane, and she would have had no future. Of course, at first, she was burning with resentment. Furamo gently touched Toishi's cheek with her fingers and told him that things were different now. Just then, Marl entered the dining room, and Furamo immediately went to prepare her breakfast. As soon as the maid left, Marl turned to Toishi. She nudged him and asked if she could also start providing him with some services. She was curious about what Furamo had told him, but Toishi quickly finished his breakfast and announced he was heading to the workshop. The hero felt his heart almost leap out of his chest. He tried to compose himself, convincing himself it was just a joke and that Marl would always come first for him. Soon after, Toishi had another meeting with Marquis Zontak, who said that by announcing the start of the flood, he wanted to ask the country's hero to boost morale. Toishi understood that the Marquis wanted him to speak, despite the earlier request to refrain from doing so. Zontak apologized, saying their country wasn't in a position to ask him, but he knew there was no one else to ask. The hero agreed but warned that if anything happened to Marl or his friends, the entire kingdom would become his enemy. Toishi figured things weren't so bad. This way, he could curry favor with the kingdom, and perhaps the reward after the flood would be a mansion much grander than his current one, or maybe even an entire territory. And they better not dare overlook his successes. Meanwhile, Zontak handed Toishi a schedule of his appearances, and keeping the issue with Marl in mind, the Marquis wished to make a suggestion. Marl, after listening to Toishi, wasn't against being present as well. Marl had fled the kingdom of Misgronia because she had no intention of entering into a political marriage, and now she would see all her opponents, so they should listen to Zontak's proposal. This proposal was based on the idea that Marl, the first princess of the kingdom of Misgronia, who deeply respected heroes, had received a divine revelation and left her country. She met the great hero and supported him on his journey. The love between a hero and a princess sounds quite beautiful, and in the eyes of the people of both countries, they would be like characters from fairy tales. Marl expressed doubt that difficulties might arise since she had fled the country without permission, although it would be much harder for her family to make a fuss about her escape if she claimed she had done the right thing. However, they are walking on very thin ice. There's a chance that the flood could cause unrest if she chooses the hero as her spouse. Her engagement to the prince of the neighboring country would be broken, and all the residents of the Calendale kingdom would witness their engagement. They could also use the performances to announce their engagement. She might have run away from home, but Toishi helped her, and she's grateful to him for that. Marl stated that Toishi had been taking concubines left and right lately, to which the hero replied that she was his only one, and besides, he had been thinking only about the flood recently. The hero's performances about the flood were approaching. They had also increased weapon production, but there were still many things left to do, especially making all the residents of the mansion stronger. Toishi and Marl returned home, and Furamu met them at the entrance. The hero invited the maid into the living room to talk with her. Everyone in the mansion had gathered there, and Toishi announced that he wanted to talk to them about the Great Flood. He believed the house walls would withstand it, but you never know what awaits everyone. What if a thief got in through the fireplace? Therefore, some measures needed to be taken. The hero handed Furamu a dagger and said that last time she didn't take it because she considered herself a slave, but this time she must accept it. With it, she could protect everyone while he was away from the mansion. Furamu looked very embarrassed. She replied that she was a former assassin, but now she was a slave and was not allowed to possess weapons. Toishi raised his voice and said that it was not a request, but an order. The girl accepted the dagger from the hero's hands and promised to protect the mansion with her life, and Toishi said that he wanted her to protect herself as well. She might consider herself a slave, but he, a knight of the Calendale Kingdom, was ordering her to protect herself. To protect herself and everyone living in this mansion. A look of determination appeared in the former slave's eyes, and she swore to carry out his order. Marl and Furamu were relaxing in the pool, and the princess said that the maid had become a concubine. Furamu replied that if she ever got pregnant, she didn't want to make Toishi endure it. Marl looked at the girl in horror, and Furamu explained that after all, she was a concubine, and perhaps Marl wanted to become one too. Marl replied, flustered, that she would think about it. Furamu swore to the hero that she would try her absolute best. She apologized and leaned towards him as he lay in bed. Toishi mumbled that he was certainly happy to have her, but he couldn't hug anyone other than Marl. Furamu reassured the young man, telling him that he was a man and shouldn't worry. The hero noted that she was like a demon whispering sweet words, but it seemed there was no turning back now. Furamu then asked her master how far they would go together. After that, their lips met in a long kiss. Even though the girl felt awkward, she really enjoyed it. She told Toishi that she was very happy. Their actions became passionate, accompanied by exclamations and moans. Toishi thought that Furamu was much more mature than Marl, and her chest was so large that it trembled with their movements. Their passion reached its peak. Afterward, Furamu collapsed onto her back, exhausted, and closed her eyes. Toishi asked how she was feeling, and the girl replied that she felt wonderful. She told the hero that it was her duty to serve him, but Toishi couldn't understand what she was talking about. Furamu explained that it seemed only she was feeling good so far, and she would keep trying until he was satisfied. They spent the entire night like that, as the closer the body, the closer the heart, but an unsettling feeling crept into Toishi's chest. In the morning, there was a knock at the door, and Marl's voice asked if they had had enough fun yet. Marl entered the room, and Furamu asked her why she was breaking her promise. The princess replied that she wasn't breaking anything. She just wanted to join them. Toishi definitely didn't expect things to unfold this way. Later, the hero lay between two sleeping girls, thinking that this was every man's dream, but for some reason, he felt guilty. The girls opened their eyes and simultaneously asked the hero if he was ready. Jack found his master sleeping in his workshop at the workbench and covered him with a blanket. This happened about 20 days after they learned about the Great Flood. Toishi felt like he was dying, and Marl tried to revive him, offering him a fatigue medicine. Lately, Marl had been using Toishi as a guinea pig to test her potions. Poison didn't affect him, but there were still side effects. Marl asked the young man how he felt, and he replied that he was unnaturally tired and inquired about the potion's side effects. Marl reassured the hero, stating that it was just a matter of getting used to it. Then Toishi showed Marl the weapon blades, all packed in boxes. Finally, he finished making the blades for Zontak, and Marl asked the young man if he had made himself a new weapon. Toishi showed Marl a beautiful sword made from two alloys, divine silver and crystal, which he had created through trial and error. The princess had never heard of divine silver before, and the hero explained that it's often called orichalcum, an alloy obtained by processing mithril, also known as true silver. This sword has the strength of orichalcum while retaining the lightness of mithril, and the blade's core is made of crystal, which enhances magical effectiveness. The girl asked about her sword, and Toishi said that his current goal was to enhance their weapons. Most likely, she would want to use the mithril dagger he had given her that time. He reforged the mithril dagger and tried to make a new saber for her, designing it to match the dagger, and the girl noted the extraordinary beauty of this weapon. Marl sincerely thanked Toishi for his work. Then she tried out the saber, swinging it several times in the air, and the hero thought she was cute, but the scene was quite terrifying. He believed Marl would look great using both the dagger and the saber simultaneously. He then remembered that Furamu was a good fencer and could teach Marl how to fight. The girl was delighted and decided to invite her to train in the backyard. Ever since Toishi began preparing for the Great Flood, he had been creating weapons and earning money, and now, no matter where he was, he continued to prepare. There were more requests from the guild to eliminate monsters, and during this preparation, he was able to raise his magic level to 5 using skill points as well as powerful magic, and maximized his magical and physical strength enhancements, making his status surprisingly good. His training with Marl hadn't progressed further. He was now level 31 and wanted to see what the princess had learned during this time. Her progress was quite good and she had grown stronger thanks to Furam's tutelage. Marl had reached level 3 in swordsmanship and learned the dual-wielding skill. Now they were ready. Amidst the tension surrounding the Great Flood, the day of the hero's appearance had arrived. When Marl put on her armor, Toishi told her she looked like a princess, to which she reminded him that she was indeed a princess and he looked like a hero. Toishi laughed and replied that it was because he was the hero. He and Marl donned their mithril armor and waited. Toishi was surprised by Marl's revealing armor and asked Zontak if such armor could truly protect her. The Marquis replied that it wasn't just fabric, it was a mithril mesh woven from invisible mithril. It would protect her far better than plate armor, and its enchantment increased physical defense. He believed this armor was superior to his own. He announced that the ceremony would begin soon and asked if the hero had the script with him. Then Zontak began to read that for the first time in 50 years, a hero had appeared in their kingdom, and in his honor, they were holding a ceremony to celebrate the hero's marriage. But there was something else important. The Great Flood was coming. The Marquis was confident that this ceremony would attract many people and make them nervous, but in reality, only Toishi was nervous at the moment. The city streets were overflowing with residents who stood waiting for the hero's wedding ceremony. Toishi and Marl sat inside a carriage that made its way through the cheering crowd. Many thought the hero looked very unusual and the girl next to him was very cute. In the crowd, people were discussing the hero's abilities, with many believing he was a troll slayer. Toishi felt uncomfortable due to the various conversations about his identity. Marl joyfully told Toishi that his hero nickname would now be known to everyone, and the news of him being a hero would spread further and further. However, Toishi had a feeling that something was going wrong, but at least his dignity was preserved. After the procession from the castle to the city walls concluded, the Great Flood was finally announced. The sovereign addressed the residents of the capital Alphen and informed them that there was an important announcement. The oracle had received a vision that the Great Flood would strike in 2 months, but there was no cause for alarm among the citizens because this time, they had someone who would protect everyone. This was Toishi Mitsubo, the first hero found in their kingdom in a long time. Despite only recently becoming an adventurer, the hero had single-handedly defeated 3 trolls and earned the title Scourge of Trolls. After this, the king called upon the residents of the Calendale kingdom to welcome the hero. He informed the capital's residents that they had also begun developing and producing new types of weapons, which would make their army stronger. Also with them was Molière Vran Misgronia, the first princess of a neighboring country, who had previously helped the hero on his journeys. She had joined the oracle and left her homeland, now supporting Toishi in all his endeavors. She was truly the oracle's saint, and with the arrival of both the hero and the saint, their kingdom would definitely survive the flood. His Majesty wanted to remind all the kingdom's residents of something important. He wanted to remind them of their kingdom's wealth and immense strength, and the king urged everyone to fight the flood for the sake of their families and loved ones. The crowd as one swore to defend Calendale. Zontak told the emperor that he had delivered an excellent speech. Toishi and Marl, on the other hand, could barely hold back their laughter. Toishi was laughing at the title Oracle Saint. It felt too strange to call someone a saint who had practically pounced on him the very first day they met, and on top of that, they were calling him a hero. Regardless, all they could do now was wait for the flood. Marl asked the young man what they needed to fight for. He wasn't even a citizen of this country or a resident of this city. Essentially, they could handle the flood without him. Toishi replied that he had his own reasons, whether he wanted to test his strength or receive a reward from the king. He could say one thing with firm certainty: if he ran away, he would regret it for the rest of his life, constantly haunted by guilt over the deaths of the residents. Marl, her voice trembling, asked if he himself might die. Toishi responded that anything was possible, but there was also a chance that no monster in the flood would be stronger than him. Besides, by fighting, he could protect her and everyone in the mansion. Just then, a group of residents spotted Toishi and Marl on the wall. They happily waved and said that the hero and the saint made a wonderful couple. Marl thanked the people and declared that it seemed they had become popular. Toishi stated that he actually had no desire to become a hero for them. Marl gave a charming smile, and the hero thought he'd love to see her smile forever. He told the girl that they would definitely survive this great flood, and he would protect her. Suddenly, the sky turned black and a strong wind erupted. Toishi and Marl realized that the Great Flood was beginning. A few days prior, a strategic council of the Alphen Knights, the army of the Calendale Kingdom, was held at the Fourth Wall. It was reported that the kingdom had the fortress cities of Crossroad, Glodies, and Berlian, and based on past flood data, these cities would hold out for at least a week or two, or even a month. The only problem was the distribution of forces. The priority was Glodies and Berlian. If they fell, demons would swarm from the mountainous regions. Moving troops would take time, prolonged battles would exhaust the army, and a miscalculation in numbers would lead to defeat. Therefore, they needed to carefully consider how many forces to allocate and where. Zontak wanted to give the hero temporary command of the capital. Toishi, puzzled, asked why him, since he was the leader of the knights. However, the Marquis insisted, saying that when the flood began, he should use magic to repel the hordes of monsters from the Fourth Wall. This sounded tempting, and the hero decided to give it a try. Marl anxiously asked the young man if he was sure, and Toishi replied that this was exactly what he had been preparing his weapon and raising his rank for. He was ready. The magic he had leveled up to 5 during his preparation would help him. Toishi was on the Fourth Wall, and the day everyone had been expecting finally arrived. A deafening explosion echoed through the air. Amidst the fire and smoke, figures of various monsters could be seen. Toishi gained 2 levels after casting the Great Explosion spell, which was pure magic firing long-range projectiles. The power of such a spell was enough to create a crater with a radius of about 100 meters at its impact point. Marl suggested that with such power, the flood would end in an instant, and the hero would be more than happy with that outcome. Toishi reported that the monsters that appeared today might not be the enemy's main force. They were attacking in a coordinated manner, utilizing the intervals between explosions. Apparently, this was only the beginning of the Great Flood. A massive black hole opened up in the sky, and a moment later, a monster's claw emerged from it. Something huge and terrifying was climbing out of this hole, and it looked like a real catastrophe was unfolding. Marl anxiously asked Toishi if he could defeat it, and the hero decided he couldn't let this behemoth get out, so he activated his Big Bang magic. A part of the monster's claw shot high into the air, then, gushing blood, crashed down near the city walls. Toishi was determined to leave no trace of this demon, directing another explosion towards the enormous hole. None of the knights had ever seen such a massive hand. It seemed the hero had managed to tear off a part of the monster's arm with his magic. But what would they do if the giant's entire body appeared? Meanwhile, Toishi noticed he had gained 3 whole levels from this battle. The hero himself didn't know what kind of creature it was. He tried to shake off the unsettling thoughts because he needed to defeat the remaining monsters. After all, the Great Flood had only just begun. Hiding behind a door, Mabel asked her uncle what that black sphere was, and Jack replied that he had never encountered anything like it in his entire life. Fioramu observed that with the disappearance of that hand, there were fewer monsters. Mabel fearfully hoped they would be safe in the mansion, while Fioramu said the monsters had become much more active and they could only defend themselves and wait. They had to trust their master. After the behemoth was killed, the monsters stopped their advance, and by noon, everything was quiet. Most likely, that huge monster was leading the others to attack the capital. At 29 years old, Toishi wanted to live freely in another world. They set off for the royal capital to save yet another city. A few days later, they arrived at the fortress city of Berlian, located west of the royal capital. During their journey, the hero acquired the riding skill. Marl, as always, accompanied him, but here they had to face a dragon. The dragon could breathe fire, and seeing Marl tremble, Toishi told her to stay put while he dealt with the monster. The girl didn't want Toishi to go alone, but the hero assured her it would be a fun victory and used his wind glass magic. His steps became swift and decisive. Before taking on the dragon, the hero first needed to get rid of the flying creatures accompanying it, so he activated a line of light. This powerful magic easily destroyed the smaller monsters. The dragon unleashed a massive stream of fire towards the hero, and Toishi exclaimed that he was starting to enjoy this. Now he and the monster were in close proximity. Using his magic, Toishi channeled energy into the monster's head, and the dragon's head separated from its body. The hero was pleased he had managed to defeat this powerful monster as well. Marl didn't believe Toishi's claim that he was only a little worried, and while he could now make something useful from the dragon's remains, she asked him who would benefit from it if he had been reduced to a wet spot. Toishi simply wanted to protect Marl and keep her out of danger, and he could defeat the dragon faster alone. He humbly listened as the princess asked him not to do anything so foolish again. She took out her potion and made Toishi drink it as punishment. The girl pointed out to the hero that if this had happened right in the city, he wouldn't have gotten away with it. She wondered if human life was valued more than defeating a monster, after which they headed to Glodi's. Toishi decided to let everything be carried away by the wind and activated his power surge. He believed it was better to die peacefully without knowing pain. In the city, he also defeated the demons, completely crushing them. His level rose to 61, but now the leveling up had slowed down. He immediately raised his magic to the maximum level with excess experience points and acquired many usable spells. Toishi could now instantly travel long distances, which greatly surprised Marl, and the troops also began to move quickly using the transition gates. They returned to the royal capital of Alphen, and Marl, stretching sweetly, said that they could now rest a bit, thanks to the transition gates. Marl suggested they return to the mansion the same way. She really wanted to finally take a bath. The hero informed the princess that he was heading to Crossroad. According to a report from the Crossroad Knight Order, part of the royal army, hordes of winged demons have been besieging the area all day. Their numbers are increasing, and measures need to be taken. Their forces are insufficient to defeat all the demons, and it seems the number of wounded is also increasing. Their strength is very depleted. Marl remembered the innkeeper they had helped and the members of the Adventurers Guild, and the girl declared that she would go with Toishi too. The hero replied that she shouldn't go to such a dangerous place, mentioning the appearance of demons, the number of injured, and finally, the hands from the abyss that they needed to worry about. Marl realized that there was no stopping the hero. No matter how much she tried, he would go anyway. She only asked him to be careful and to run away if things got really bad. When Toishi arrived in Crossroad, he understood that the situation there was serious. He saw a huge number of various winged monsters and immediately began fighting them. Waltz was expecting help from the royal capital any minute. However, there was no sign of them. Just then, Ethan looked closely at a fighter who was energetically battling the monsters. Ethan happily greeted Toishi, saying they hadn't seen each other in a long time. The hero also recognized the adventurer with whom he had fought trolls before. Ethan remarked that Toishi looked very well, and Captain Waltz approached the young men, also greeting the hero. He asked for permission to simply call Toishi warrior, and the hero agreed, inquiring about the current situation. The captain replied that due to the large overflow, demons that usually don't appear were starting to emerge. He couldn't understand where so many of them were coming from. Toishi praised them for holding out well and asked them to rely on him now. He activated Power Surge and exclaimed that he was back in Crossroad. Seeing such powerful magic, Ethan commented that Toishi was becoming less and less human. In any case, if they didn't overcome the overflow first, it wouldn't become history. The hero noticed that a black sphere had appeared in this place too, and everyone froze in anticipation. Toishi used his scan skill and doubled his magic output. A sense of danger was blaring in his head, and he yelled at his comrades to run away. Ethan replied that he had the strength of 1,000 men, so why should they run from here? Toishi diverted the sphere's attention to himself, and it all happened in an instant. The sphere struck him in the chest. The last thing he heard was his name, shouted by Ethan and Waltz. Toishi struggled to one knee, leaning on his sword, and thought about how that black sphere had indeed appeared. The captain rushed over to the young man and asked if he was all right. The hero replied that things were very bad. He wasn't even sure if he could fight in this condition if an enemy appeared in the capital. But before that could happen, he intended to strike the black sphere. Toishi unleashed a maximum explosion. He saw a black spear flying directly at him, but that's exactly what was supposed to happen. Now all attacks were coming straight for him. This meant that the entity was still alive. Meanwhile, using his skill, he overheard a message transmitted to the monster. An order had been received from headquarters to eliminate anyone attempting to disrupt the balance. Then Toishi saw that enormous monster with giant paws. It seemed his opponents weren't just ordinary adventurers. Even though everyone started attacking it, it focused its aim on the hero. A message appeared on the battlefield, addressed to Captain Waltz, stating they wanted to demote adventurers below rank A. Toishi didn't even understand what they were talking about when they mentioned disrupting the balance. He only knew the monster was targeting him. He wondered how much magical power he had left. He saw that some parts of the monster's body were damaged from his maximum explosion, meaning his attack wasn't very effective. Toishi realized that for a moment, this monster had delayed its actions. The lion charged into attack. He had enough time. The monster's powerful attack hit its mark, and the hero felt a strange sensation. A black arrow pierced his body. The monster's terrifying face loomed over him, and Toishi screamed. He couldn't understand what was happening to him. It felt like hundreds of arrows had pierced him, leaving him suspended in the air. Toishi looked into the monster's burning eyes and realized he was going to die there. He indifferently thought that he should have just run away without getting into any fights, especially since he wasn't even from this world. Toishi lay in a pool of his own blood, thinking that this might be the end of the game. Above his body, he saw Marl's ghostly figure and wondered why she was there. Toishi thought it was Marl's magic inside him. She asked if he was crying, and the hero didn't deny it, as he had broken his promise to protect Marl and the others in the mansion. Marl approached him and told him he wouldn't lose here. Toishi clutched the hilt of his sword convulsively and told Marl to wait for him. He wouldn't meet his end here. A volley of arrows from the royal warriors attacked the monster, with Toishi standing before it. It was the crusade which had come to help along with the Alphan Knight Order. They simply couldn't stand by any longer, and Toishi thanked Commander Waltz for the covering fire. The hero raised his sword and, with his last ounce of strength, charged at the lion. Toishi understood that the essence of his strange feeling lay in the monster's attack. There was absolutely no sound in its movements, and moreover, when it dragged its paws across the ground, no dust clouds rose, which was the reason for his strange feeling. Toishi was confident that even if the situation got out of control, it could still be resolved, so he activated his regeneration magic. Toishi decided that even if the monster's movements were silent, it didn't mean its tracks disappeared. Then, using his track vision skill, he would follow the black lion and attack it faster than it could make any moves itself. The hero activated his short-range teleportation and successfully attacked the monster. Now he understood that this maneuver needed to be repeated again and again. Evidently, the monster continued to believe it could devour the man standing before it. Using magic, Toishi delivered a significant blow to his opponent. The monster roared with a wild voice. The hero's sword continued to wound the powerful monster. Finally, one of his attacks landed a precise and powerful blow, severing the lion's head from its body. The hero, exhausted, slumped down next to the grotesque head and wondered who this creature even was. Was it sharing information with the hand that had appeared in the capital? He had also heard the word headquarters, meaning this was a unit giving orders to both the Black Lion and the Hand. What did these headquarters mean, and who wanted to disrupt the balance? He poked the lion's head with the tip of his sword and demanded answers. However, the transmission had already been cut off. Toishi fell into deep thought. He considered that the headquarters wanted to capture those who sought to disrupt the balance, causing immense chaos, attacking every country, and reducing the human population. These were the ones trying to upset the balance. But who were they, and what was their goal? What he needed to fight first wasn't monsters or specific units. It was likely something much bigger. Just then, royal warriors approached him, accusing him of recklessness, and asked if he was all right. He admitted his fault, but he didn't care. He had managed to protect not only Marl but everyone present, and for now, that was enough.